The meeting will come to order. The meeting is being televised and recorded. Is anyone in the audience recording? You have an A&R?
I do. This is 6 or 4? 6 Rochelle. And what's happening is the property at 147, I'm going to guess that's Magna Vista, possibly Burnett, is moving a lot line to provide some additional lot to 6 Rochelle. So the lot line is moving, you see the closest lot line to you?
Yep, right here.
Yep, that's moving north to the farther
To
lot
here.
line, correct.
And it's giving them an additional...
All the lots remain conforming.
Now I see shed here.
That shed has been removed.
This one will still have 125 feet of frontage
Correct.
to the dot.
Let's not write on
This
the Mylar,
remains at
please.
265, 60.
Correct.
Okay. Square foot. And this is in
Well,
residential.
he's gaining lot size.
Yeah.
So even if he is sub the requirement, it's irrelevant because he's becoming more conforming. We're not, the A&R is not making him more non-conforming. I believe it does conform. I believe it's a Res B.
Jimmy, want to look at this?
Yeah, there's.
Explain it to him, Adam.
It's a lot line move.
So from where the dot is over?
Yeah, so
This guy actually has more, because more than conforming, so.
this is the current lot line.
Yeah.
This will be the new lot line.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, any questions from anyone, by anyone? Adequate frontage on both of them, more than what was there prior to on the other one? You have a motion?
Motion to approve. Well,
Yeah.
Second?
Motion to sign,
motion to sign. Approval not required.
Yeah,
but you still have to approve it.
Okay.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sign it all, do Bill?
Yeah.
Let me see those. What do you need?
There's only 2 papers there.
Looks good.
Adam, you got one more of this?
I do. It's in the office. I'm not worried about it. I can.
2 is okay?
Yeah. Thank you. There you go. You bring back, when you record it, they'll give you a register receipt.
Yep.
You photocopy that and either fax it or send it or scan it, however you get it back to me, just so I have a copy.
Okay.
Thanks.
Is there an extra?
There isn't. because I've got to give those to other people. So, like I said,
We
I'd
didn't
stop
have
at
any in the
Staples
packets
or
either.
something like that and just
My
have them.
wife dropped another one off here.
She did.
Yeah, she did today.
Huh.
Why
No
don't
one
you
ever
see if
gave
you-
that to me.
Why don't you see if you can find it, maybe we can sign it now. and just-
Because I don't, just give him one of those and I'll figure it out with the other one. There you go. Excuse me.
Seven oh five, public hearing. Applicant is the Masad Family LLC requesting a modification of the approved site plans as allowed under section 3263 of the Auburn zoning bylaws for property located at 50 Faith Ave, Auburn, Mass. Map 55, parcels 1, 2, 3, 181, and 182. Map 60, parcels 12, 15, and 16, and map 61, parcel 16. The applicant is Masad Family LLC Diamond Service Facility, requesting the approval of a definitive subdivision plan for properties located at 50 and 51 Faith Ave and 768 Washington Street, map 55, parcels 1, 2, 3, 181, and 182, map 61, parcels 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 68.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Paul O'Brien, representing Masad Family LLC, as well as Diamond Chevrolet, Buick, Cadillac, etc. With me tonight is David Masad from Masad Family LLC, Joe Simon from the Diamond dealerships, and Mike Scott from Waterman Design. And the whole purpose, I know that you're aware of, is to try to bring this site into compliance with the zoning bylaws and the get to the point where we have an approved plan that we can work with and the town can work with and be satisfied with. So I'll yield the floor to Mr. Scott.
Mike Scott, Waterman Design, in Westboro. Excuse me, as Mr. O'Brien indicated, and their agenda bears out, there are two applications specific to the properties that the Masad family owns and that house their dealerships and service centers out on Faith Avenue and that front, some of which front on Washington Street. The first of the two matters is the approval or a modification to the approval of their site plan, which was approved, I think initially back in '08 or so, and later, and maybe later in '11, summer of '11, about a year and a half ago. It was that later plan that they began construction on and completed, or got to the point where they're about 90% complete, 95% complete. Probably a few months back, took occupancy, and when was that? Right around,
Just before Christmas.
was it yeah, December of 2012, so they've been in a few months.
That's in the new build.
That's correct, and that's what you see here. So to orient ourselves, Route 20 is down here, this is Faith Avenue, north is in this direction. Their other dealerships are here where the notes are. This is the new building that was constructed that was the subject of the site plan approval several years ago. When we did the as-built plan for the building department, it became apparent that a number of things that were constructed were not necessarily on the approved plan. And so as a condition of their occupancy, temporary occupancy, there were multiple conditions, several stipulations about visiting the zoning board, visiting this board, and coming up with a scheme or a legitimate plan is probably a better way to put it, that would bring their property into conformance to this particular site. Something else that the Masads wanted to do and this was, I think, made clear to the town a few years ago, was eventually to relocate Faith Avenue in some manner that they could then take this piece of the, I'll call it a horseshoe or the loop, around the back of their building, because you have the highway ramp here, so you have no abutters in this direction. You have the highway ramps back here, you have no abutters in that direction, other than the Commonwealth.
So you're saying you want to take that curve out?
And relocate the road. That would be the subject of the subdivision. I want to start with going through the site plan just so we can understand where we'd like to be and then where they'd really like to be. But why I'm saying that is there had been some discussion about expanding this property beyond its present boundary and beyond what was approved by the town. And it had been discussed with the town, but there never been a plan presented. So that's the second half of the evening. The first half, again, is to deal with the fact that, in essence, they over-constructed out here. And we were before the zoning board, the four of us, last Thursday evening. We presented this same plan. Again, this is the existing condition plan. So what you see is that's the limit of the parking that they constructed. There's an entrance off of Faith here. You can see the building, which is roughly 31,000 plus square feet. There's also another entrance on the back or the north side of the building. The main entrance being here if you haven't been in it. This portion of the building serves the write-up area and where the staff is occupying the building with offices. There's a small kitchenette in this area for waiting customers. And then this portion of the building to the north is the service center, so the bays and the vehicle repair goes on in this portion of the building. The building was roughly 80% larger than approved as part of the site plan. I think the original plan was somewhere on the order of 16,000, 17,000 square feet. This building is over 31,000 square feet. You'd also notice, if you had the other plan, that there are no islands, no landscaped islands. We don't show the striping. When we surveyed this, they hadn't put the temporary striping on it yet. That's since been done. So there is a striping configuration out at the lot whereby customers have access and safe parking against the building, and they have vehicles displayed on the property as well. Another thing that happened between the time the town approved the site plan and the time that they constructed was the Massets acquired another parcel, which was never mentioned in any permit that they got. And that would be, I think it's 6116. I know it's 16. It's the parcel here that if you project this line straight through and end up at Faith, there had been a single-family home here which they purchased, demolished, and then expanded their parking onto. So, in short, there's quite a bit more construction out here than originally approved. And as we discussed with the zoning board last week, the site being in the aquifer zones and subject to the various permits is really just not conforming in a number of ways. The building does conform to the setback requirements.
Now, when you built the larger building, did they get that permitted, or just built it based on the 16,000 square foot building?
No, it's my understanding that
Building permit issued.
there was a building permit issued for the larger building, and that the foundation went up, and then the rest of the building went up on top of it. And other than the building department, no one ever saw the change to the site, or well, to the building first, or to the site second.
Is that a proposed building to
No,
the right where the parking
this is what's at the site today.
That's the
This is as
drainage
constructed.
the one outlined in red?
That's a property line. That's their
No,
property.
but
This is
that
their building. Yeah,
that's
that's
the
their
building
building
that's
today.
sitting there right
The
now.
approved building was probably
But to the
something
right,
like
I see a square.
Oh, that's the infiltration system.
Oh,
That's
okay.
not subsurface. That's subsurface, which was required and was constructed. When we did our as-built survey, what we determined was that they put in nearly all the drainage components. They rectified what was missing, and Mr. Antanavica witnessed that and made that statement. I also witnessed some of it and described that to the board last Thursday. So from a stormwater management perspective, that's the one thing they did without question to the standards that both the site plan review required and the Conservation Commission required. But again, the building's too large and there's too much pavement.
Excuse me, do those approvals also include the impervious area that was added on the secondary
No,
property?
nothing would have included that.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, with respect to the subsurface materials or equipment, infrastructure, we believe they've done what they need to do. In fact, they actually added a water quality structure by virtue of putting it in the wrong place in the first time, but going back and correcting it.
So their infiltration system, is that designed to carry the capacity from that additional impervious area?
Yeah, that's actually summarized in the letter that I provided. We took a look at the various reports and prior analysis that were done by the previous engineer. We didn't do the design work here. But we went through the various reports which Adam provided, and then we also had Conservation Commission approvals and documents from the Conservation Commission. And this project was peer reviewed in the site plan review process by Graves Engineering in Worcester, and they made comments to some early design studies and calculations done by the other engineer that had done the design plans, and had him adjust his calculations to more accurately reflect the actual drainage patterns. And when he did that, the result was that he didn't need as much of the infrastructure as was proposed, but they didn't downsize it. Whether that was just for expedience, just to keep going, or was be conservative, I don't know. But suffice it to say, they had a system designed for a huge area. The reanalysis showed it was significantly smaller, and the result is somewhere in between. Well, not this result. I'll show you what the proposal is. This actually exceeds what's allowable. What we showed the zoning board the other night in order to bring the site into compliance, because another non-conforming aspect is, due to the aquifer protection, the maximum allowable impervious area on the site is 80%, and this is over 80% today. But what we showed the zoning board, and which the plan that was included in the site plan modification application that we filed in early February, is this plan. And what this plan shows is the same building. There's no change to the building. You can see the property line in red. The site entrance here on the south side of the building, where it's between their other lots. And what we've done is we show removal of pavement around the perimeter to, one, reduce the amount of impervious, obviously. Another aspect of doing that is you have a 10-foot no parking setback, so this would take pavement to the limit of that no parking setback. And then we show some narrow strips of green here, and I'll explain why. We show some green space around the building, and we show the removal of the second driveway at this location, and we show the removal of some pavement in this part of the site. And this actually brings the site under 80% impervious, which means it's permissible in the zone via a special permit, which the zoning board approved the amendment to last Thursday night. It also would allow the installation of some of the landscaping that was approved by or required by this board. And it also provides the appropriate amount of parking per zoning, which is not to say it's exactly what the Masses want, but it conforms to zoning, and this was confirmed by Mr. Antanabica in a letter, zoning opinion, prior to our submittal of this plan. And so what you see is some green space around the building that you would see on the approved plan, not as much, but some instead of none. And then these narrow strips to define the parking aisles are actually centered. You can't see it at this scale, but there are existing light standards out there with light pole bases above grade, so rather than having them rip out all their infrastructure to put islands in, we're simply aligning, because this would be vehicular storage over here, so that's why the spaces are a little, they're smaller, the compact. And again, this would look a lot like the approved plan if you had that. I have it under here if you want to see it. But and this likewise would be a strip along existing lighting, which would again allow them to demo some of what they've built, but not start from scratch and remove everything that's on the site. And of course the building would remain. So the combination of this plan and that additional land that they acquired would bring the properties into conformance with the 80% open space. It would provide, maximum impervious, 20% pervious area. It would provide requisite parking, and it would afford them extra space for storing vehicles, which is of course something that they're interested in having. The site, I will note, would conform to ADA as well. This area where the accessible parking is provided, actually, this is about the only truly flat spot on the site, and that's not only proximate to the main entry, but it's also flat enough. So we presented this plan to the zoning board. They understood the change, the predicament, if you will, of having the building that's too large, and not wanting to start from scratch and tear the whole place apart to come into conformance. So that initial request to modify the site plan approval is really contingent on what I'm terming an interim parking plan, because this is something they could do to come into conformance, but the subdivision is what they'd ultimately like to do, so the two, they dovetail. But if the subdivision didn't happen or could not be approved, this would be a plan that they could, in essence, deconstruct some of what they built and get themselves to a point where they have a viable standalone site that conforms to the town's bylaws for this particular type of use in this zone. So I think the first request is that the board consider, or would certainly like to discuss, consideration of this plan as a modification to their prior site plan approvals. And then we can move into what they'd like to do with the subdivision, or we can jump right into it if that's what the board would like to hear.
How could it be possible that you double the size of the building and nobody, including Adam or whatever, would tell you that you needed a new site plan modification in order to do that?
I can't answer that.
Well, I can speak from my point of view. It was filed as a building permit. The building inspector gets copies of site plan approval of documents, the approvals that you sign. Whether they choose to read them, interpret them, and follow them when a building permit is filed isn't something that I necessarily watch every minute, because that's something that they're supposed to do as part of their job. The permit was issued, I believe you got a foundation permit in December of 11. Then there was a new inspector who issued the actual above ground building permit. And so, and then there was a third inspector who actually did some of the subsequent inspections to that. So it all sort of happened in a period of flux, and unfortunately sometimes things like that happen.
Well, here's my thought to the whole thing. This might be a perfect plan. Everything might be in order. Everything might be 100% accurate. I would assume that the planning board, in this particular case, to be clear on our behalf, would have to call for a peer review on the modification.
And that is underway.
So until we got that peer review on that modification, I don't think we can do anything.
I will agree with you that I would not recommend the board take action until such time as the peer review is completed. I think, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Scott, but through my conversations with him and my conversations with Mr. Antanovica, what Mr. Scott is looking for right now, I think, is sort of the temperature of the board, which direction you might be leaning. And I think that with the subdivision discussion, you may get a little clearer view. And again, clearly anything that you say could change upon new information from the peer review. If you're disinclined to approve this modification for whatever reason, that has implications one way. If you're inclined to look at it as working with the applicant and trying to make the best out of what has happened, that has other implications. I'm not suggesting that this board has to go one way or the other, but I think what they're looking to do is start the conversation. A big part of this is a condition of the temporary occupancy permit requires that they come and be in process with these boards prior to a certain date. Clearly they're abiding by that, and the decision of this board has implications on that outside of this.
So there's two parts to the public hearing. You're looking first for a modification to this, to the as-built, not what was on the original plan.
Undoing part of what was built, correct?
And you've already asked for a peer review?
Yes, it is in the hands of Graves.
Okay, and when?
They expect in
Because we usually
the second
vote on,
meeting
we
in
usually
April.
vote on that, or who we're gonna select for that. But all right, so Graves has
Yes,
got it.
they have it in their hands.
And when would you say?
The second meeting in April, they said they would have a review
So that's,
done by.
In no way would I want to stop a project like this if everything conforms to the bylaws
Mhm.
in the town. However, there's been a lot of uttering in the town that we're rubber stamping things.
Mhm.
I just want to make it clear that we don't rubber stamp things.
No.
Okay, and this would be one instance where if we were to approve this without having all the facts, that we would be rubber stamping it.
Oh, and
Absolutely.
I am in no way suggesting that you should approve anything without all the facts. I think, again, tonight, the purpose of tonight, from my conversations with Mr. Scott, were he wants to start to see where the board is at, so as the peer review comes back, he can start to address those comments in a manner that's going to be in the interest of moving this forward and not in the interest of answering the peer review to come back and have the board say, yeah, that's great, but that's not what we want.
Minimally, we'd like to see it be as conforming as you can to what the peer review said, or what should be as it is as built. You know what I'm saying? You already said that you took some pavement away and
Well, the plan, they haven't taken any away yet. The plan is, if the plan would be that the zoning board approved what you see here in terms of meeting the maximum 80%, and the fact that it conforms to the bylaw with respect to the building setbacks, with respect to the parking. There was no discussion about some of the other things that would have been, in front of this board.
Landscape.
So you're going to see the peer
Is this the
review.
lot that also has the wall that was built on the public right-of-way?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
That was, I had those questions, but I actually, if I may, have a couple of quick questions.
Let me finish.
Yep.
So you will get the peer review, and you'll be privy to it as soon as Adam gets it,
Mhm.
and then you'll work with them, and then you're going to have to come before us again, and then we'll look at it and we'll go from there. And that's the first part of the
That's
application. The second part of the application is approval for a definitive site plan on this other address, or whatever you're stating here.
Right, that's for a definitive subdivision, to actually
Right.
relocate a portion of Faith Avenue.
So they're two separate things.
They are two separate things.
So it's one hearing, but we could actually approve.
It's
Should
technically
we-
two hearings. I would not recommend approving anything this evening because the subdivision also is being peer reviewed and requires the peer review.
That's what I was going to
Um,
ask you.
Their reason that they're being held at the same time is because they have major implications on one another.
If, my thought is that if you comply with all the bylaws and you correct any errors by you, according to the peer review engineer, then our job is done.
Well, the landscaping here
Mm-hmm.
and around here is not compliant with the bylaw. That's something that this board has the ability to offer a waiver from as part of that landscaping bylaw. It's also contrary to what was originally approved.
We'd
Now-
want to see the peer review
That's
before
right. We'd
getting
wanna-
into any
absolutely.
waivers or anything. And now, the part that you spoke of discontinuing a section of the road and then rerouting it through to the opposite end, to the across where you bought that most recent property, Northerly. Are you going to talk about that tonight, or that's
No,
just
that's the subdivision application.
because I
Yep. When you're ready, we'll move right into that.
I think discontinuing part of the road, it would have to be before the selectmen, or
Well,
someone else has to approve that.
Yeah, before we move to the subdivision, can I ask a couple more questions about the site plan? So this area here, along this curve, is you're proposing green space. There's also a series of very large walls that start about here and end somewhere about here. Is this green space below those walls within the property line?
This wasn't, that shouldn't have been rendered that way. The green space is on this side of the red line, and you can actually see the wall right here. So this is pavement, it would remain pavement. The green space that will be added is
Correct,
is
is below the wall on,
below the wall is off the property, and it was not included. This 10-foot strip is on the property.
yes. And so the wall is here
There would
and
be
the
no
green,
green space below. There's no proposal to put green space below on the town.
I'm sorry,
right-of-way.
well, yes, but inside the property line, I'm saying below the wall, because if I'm standing on the wall, I look down into the site, and the green
Okay,
space
sorry.
is
Yep,
there.
it would be on that side of the wall.
Okay.
Yeah, the wall is actually off
On
the
the
property.
Yes. Now,
In this portion of the property.
my next question is, if, for whatever reason, the subdivision is not approved, what's the remedy for the wall
Wall would
within
have
the
to-
right-of-way?
The wall would then have to be relocated.
And then you're looking at an additional
We would have to move.
modification.
This is true.
So the wall is on,
Portions of the wall are on the
Within
town,
the right-of-way of
within
the
the town's
road.
right-of-way, that's correct. Yes, yeah, this portion is out, this portion is, actually all of this wall is inside
If-
inside the right-of-way.
you were allowed to discontinue that road and reroute it, what would you do with the road? You
Well, we'll show you
use
that
it?
plan. We'll
Okay.
show you that plan. That's what I was saying, that's why we called this an interim condition, and that's not something that we thought about, because frankly, that's not their objective. So.
Correct. I just want that to
I
be.
did make the statement, this could be done, that's not wholly true, they'd have to move the wall as part of that, and that's not something shown here.
So,
We would
and
need to modify that.
in theory, what would happen in everybody's happy place is you guys would come to most compliance with the bylaws as possible. The subdivision would get approved. The peer review engineer would say everything looks good. The planning board would be happy with what they see. And at that time, this plan would become irrelevant.
That's correct.
So technically, you're not looking for this plan to be approved. You're presenting this as, this is what we're using as the interim, and there's a second site plan that's associated with the subdivision.
That's
That would be the actual modification that they would be looking to approve should the subdivision become approved.
That's correct. And,
Okay.
and only geometrically and grading utility-wise, that's one of the two last sheets of this set.
Mhm.
We didn't redo all the landscaping because we felt like we're either going to
Well,
have to come
there's-
up with a landscape
there's
plan
additional
for this, or they're going to
implications.
have to come up with a landscape
Mhm.
plan for that. Let's not go through that effort. Let's just show that the minimum criteria have been met. There's already a requirement for landscaping on this site by your other approval. Whatever would be approved would have to follow that plan, and that's actually this was stated in both applications.
So ultimately, whatever happens with this, there will be an additional submittal outlining landscaping or removal of walls
That would
or
have to happen.
other things that would go along with that.
I haven't been there. These are concrete walls?
They are block walls,
Block.
and they are anywhere from about 12 to about 6 inches, 12 feet to about 6 inches.
Well, the tallest section is actually here where the road is being retained. The road is higher than the site. These are on the order of 4 or 5 feet.
Yeah, and I mean they go down to very, very small.
Yeah, where obviously where the driveway meets the road. Yeah, these walls that are holding the site up, if you will, are on the order of. We've got the elevations on that plan, but I can't read them. They're on the order of 5 feet probably. This area over here is probably 8 to 10 or even higher.
If you did discontinue, if you were allowed to discontinue and use that other part of the road, would you use it as a egress and access to get into the site, or
Well,
just
why don't we show you
take
the
the-
subdivision plan,
Okay.
because some of that stuff will be answered, and,
Alright.
and then there are a number of questions about the mechanics of when the subdivisions, let's say a subdivision was approved, it's built, and it sits, there's effectively two roadways there until the current one is abandoned, the other one's accepted. So there's a bunch of,
There's a
there's
lot
a number of confusing or difficult or challenging legal moves that would need to occur. And the Massids obviously would like to see the subdivision, but they'd like to see it if they knew they were going to be able to acquire this piece of the property, or in essence, the abandoned road, or else it doesn't really serve their end to any great degree. But let me show you what that would look like, and maybe that will answer most of your questions.
How does Almond take roads? Is that in fee, or is that a layout? Is that a easement? So would it?
It's taken in
immediately-
layout, and they generally are the
So
there's a deed fee turned there's a fee deed turned over
So
after the town meeting acceptance.
Is the underlying fee, was it originally part of that property and would be reverted to them, or is that something that?
That's a good question, because Faith Ave is an old road,
Okay.
and so there's some legal wrangling that has to happen.
Yep.
We have recently abandoned a much smaller piece of road and negotiated directly with the abutter and sold it to them. So we have a precedent for having done that. Now, that piece of property was worth $1,000. This is a significantly larger piece of property. Depending on its value, that was also a residential area. This is a commercial area. Based on what the assessor develops as a value base is going to depend on how the town can dispense of it. If it's below a certain dollar value, we can direct negotiate with the abutter after abandonment. If it's over that dollar value, then it turns into an RFP or auction. But that doesn't necessarily preclude the sale, it just might complicate the transaction.
Thanks, I just want to understand the site control
Mhm.
authority.
So what you see here is the second sheet of the subdivision plan that we filed last month. And in red is, well, let me stop. This is the building we were looking at that was recently constructed. What you see here, this is Washington Street. This is the existing Faith. This is the Commonwealth of Mass here. There are a number of private, privately owned neighbors to the west side, including KR Realty, which is the Johnson Seaman Engineering office here. And then there are a number of properties owned by Faith Realty Company or Faith Realty Trust, which I believe are all the same ultimate and ownership. And this is I think the transmission shop. This is a vacant piece of property today. And then the Langways, the Ford dealership is over to
Those first parcels off Faith, heading north on the left, right now, yeah, those owned by you or some other?
No.
Faith Realty Trust
Yeah,
is
Faith
another
Realty is,
entity?
no, Massett is, right, this
Okay.
is Faith, I believe it's the same ownership as Langways, as the Langway Ford, so just, this is, serves dual purposes, but, so you can see what's going on. This is the existing Chevy facility, this is the building that was just constructed, then you have the Pike and the interchanges, 395, 20, and here's the Ford dealership, this is Johnson Seaman. This photo was actually taken, there's Johnson Seaman there, sorry. No, I'm sorry, this is Johnson Seaman. This photo was from when the house was still there, so that's the house they demoed. Their property line is something like that. So that's existing Faith. This is just to get you oriented, but the proposal is to do something like that in black. So what you see is we held the common corner of the Massett's property and the existing layout, and we put a reverse curve of 110-foot center line. We ran northwesterly towards Faith, and we put another 110-foot curve in and tied back into the Faith alignment. So what you see in solid red would be the piece that the Massetts would convert to a public right-of-way, what we're terming Parcel B. That's the area that would then be annexed with either end of Faith Avenue, which are shown in the dashed lines.
And at some point look to be accepted by the town
Just like
as
any
the
other
new...
public subdivision, correct. Except in this instance, no new lots are created, because this lot, which has frontage only on Faith today, would remain with frontage only on Faith. These folks, by virtue of having a corner here where we return the road to its old alignment, don't have any change in frontage. This would be this piece over here, which we call Parcel A, which is on the west side of the street, is something that we would want to discuss with whether that would be a component of the right-of-way, whether the Massetts would want to retain it, whether there would be some kind of...
Which is parcel A?
Parcel A is this odd shape here,
Oh, okay.
which is sort of trapped by the road on the, which is the Massett's land today, sort of the leftovers, if you will.
So it doesn't let those people
We haven't
gain
created any
additional frontage on
Right,
Faith
it's not done
Avenue,
to
so
be
it's
a-
not, that's not a positive them to look, I mean, they could be in opposition to it because now they have a road coming by their house. If, you know, if that land was gonna be theirs, maybe they,
Well, this is all land that's the Massett's now.
right.
So that's why we said there's got to be some kind of discussion. These are not built. This is not a building lot. It doesn't conform. The minimum setback is so small you couldn't build. Whether they, as the Massett's owners, wish to make that part of the right of way because the town wants all that land, which I think causes some problems for your neighbors because now you have a street frontage where there may not be setbacks that could be met.
Well, what I'm looking at is if the neighbors were opposed to it and maybe they were gonna gain that piece, they might not be opposed to.
It's land that the Massets can't use, so if.
Right,
for
and it's
their
not
other
serving you any
purposes.
purpose because it's not big enough to build on.
And it's not contiguous.
Might be a, you know, a bargaining point.
Right, and then what would be left over is this outer loop of faith. So beyond these little dashed red arcs, this outer loop becomes useless in essence once the new road goes in. But it's not useless to the Massets by any stretch, because if they're going to lose or give up everything in this area, and we know already that we had to do a bunch of gymnastics to get them to conforming, they're going to be even less conforming. So what we would look to do is, what they would look to do is take, somehow acquire this land through whatever the
Process.
the process would be. And what that would allow them to do would be to end up with something like this. And this is the last, one of the last sheets in the plan set that we provided. So again, that's the building they just constructed. This would be the new Faith Ave. And then this outer Faith, what we're showing is they would retain this portion of Faith because, as you can see from the aerial,
Gets them in and out of their
they have
other
access
dealership.
here, correct, to this building. This building has no access. These two buildings have no access from Washington Street. They only have access from Faith. They would be cut off from any access. Their new access would be coming in up here. It also allows all their buildings to be effectively a campus. They can flow freely between their buildings without going onto a public
And then the
street.
rest of it would be green.
And then they would rip the pavement out in this area, and we're showing real islands, which are greater, again centered on the light standards. In this area, anything you see green would become green space. This plan is around 77% open space, and by virtue of disconnecting the road and all these other things, the drainage systems that were already oversized are now even more oversized. So the facilities that are here would continue to serve this property. They'd end up with one new driveway here. We show a driveway on this end. The orientation of this could be discussed. We don't show, as part of the subdivision, we did include a list of waivers. I won't go into them now. You can have your peer review, or you can ask if need be. But again, the end game, the ultimate goal would be for the masses to remove, you know, this road, which is certainly substandard by today's design.
I think it'd be a positive to get to take the road off, that section of road off the town's books. It's a bad curve. It doesn't serve anybody's purpose to have to go around and through and encounter the other traffic. It would make it much more expeditious, I think, unless I'm missing something. But we'll look for the peer review.
On the original plan, it looked as if your new road location was a wetland area. Is that?
Yeah, that is a wetland area. It gets kind of confusing because it's a wetland area, but it's not a wetland area you get, if you will.
The replication area from your...
Some of it, yeah, some of it is. I guess this is the best way to show it. No, it's not colored here. I can point it out. This is
Here's the-
EX1. Is yeah, there you go. It's shaded there. If you scroll through, it'll probably show it on the one of the plans there. Right there, that would help. Okay, it's not as easy to see from there, maybe.
This is
but-
easier to use because if you touch the screen, it's going to put the hand up.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's a laser.
Oh, then my hand's not steady enough. All right, so that's the new road right there, and the shaded area right in here is a wetland. As part of the approval of their, sorry, I'm looking for the plan. Part of their approval of their site plan, they agreed to do some wetland replication on the west side of the site, which is a little more apparent here. Here's the wetland in the kind of brownish greenish color. The Conservation Commission permitted the project, and this edge of pavement doesn't encroach any closer to their approvals. And in fact, they constructed some wetland replication here, and it's pretty convoluted. But the easiest way I can say it is, they didn't actually alter any wetland as part of this bordering vegetated wetland. They did alter, and this is some subject of some disagreement, but they altered an intermittent stream channel, which they then had to replicate. And as a function of replicating the stream channel, they voluntarily created something like 4,000 square feet of wetland. If that, right now the permit hasn't been closed out, so that hasn't been accepted by the Conservation Commission. Administratively, that's not a wetland. Maybe today, maybe viable. We haven't looked at it. It was installed last year, the plantings and so on. There's been no certificate of compliance issued, therefore it's not on the land's not encumbered by a wetland there, and our thought, and we filed a notice of intent this way, was to just relocate that replication to another part of the site before it's accepted. Once it's accepted, the plan goes from altering 2,000 square feet to altering over 5,000, and it may be an impossible feat with DEP. So that's why we made our filing, in part why we made our filing with the Conservation Commission the way we did. But we'll have that discussion with them tomorrow night. But the plan does call for, that's what you see here on this screen, that's the relocation of the stream channels and the wetland, and what you end up with is a contiguous wetland area. Which we're showing around 2,000 square feet of alteration of wetland that has been there historically, not the wetland that was replaced, if you will, by the construction or during the construction of this site, because that is something that they did first, and that is something that was done pretty much to plan. The approved plan is actually, it might make things more confusing, but
How does that change the proximity of the wetland to that neighbor's house?
it does bring the wetland closer to that neighbor, to the Johnson Seaman building. Right now,
It's a business, not a house.
right, the
Not that that
business
necessarily makes a difference on the encroachment, but
Doesn't. Oh, okay.
is an existing structure, yeah. The wetland is the shaded area, and there's my hand again, and then that's the building. So it is moving it closer.
So would it move it in within the wetland buffer?
I believe it
Your
would.
100 feet?
Yeah, I believe it would move it within
It-
100 feet.
it may already be within the they may
They are,
already
yeah,
be
they
within
do
the
have
buffer.
wetland on the. You can see the channel here,
Sure.
and then the building's right about where the hand is. So they are within the buffer zone today, but it does.
The hashed, the
Yep, that's their edge of
Is
their
the-
building.
This
Yep.
is the edge of the
That's the
building
Johnson
here.
Seaman
I
office.
can see it over here.
Yeah, that's the Johnson Seaman office. So, but I was showing this because this is what was required, and what was built is actually pretty similar to that. Once you get away from that, it's not so much per plan, but that portion of the site is pretty close to plan. So yeah, to answer the question, we are spanning a wetland, and instead of bridging it or doing anything like that, right now that wetland just is collected in a head wall and routed through the site, and then it spills out on the Massett's property on the low side, adjacent to a wetland area. And this being the Commonwealth, and this being the back of well, you can see it here more clearly. That's the Cadillac dealership, so that's the back of the Cadillac lot. That's their service center that this across the street replaced, and that's the Chevy dealership over there.
And as part of their previous approval, they channelized that intermittent stream, correct?
Correct. It flows.
It flows through a pipe.
It flows through a pipe independent of the site's drainage system. There's actually two trunk lines. One comes out. They tie together and go under the road through what had been a culvert. But that rectangular area you saw, which is the stormwater infiltration system, it doesn't join the pipe network from the wetland until the overflow of the infiltration system.
So the alteration doesn't change that; it allows that flow to remain. Your
Yeah, what we're doing is
proposed final
would extend that culvert up
to allow for the
for the new road.
new proposed wetlands to join
That's correct.
in the trunk line.
That's correct. And we actually, and it's spelled out in the stormwater report as well as in our letter, we evaluated, because now we're designing a road, and we evaluated the ponding and flooding of the neighbors upstream because that road has got a retaining wall on the left side, or would need a retaining wall here. And we determined that, it's my belief anyway, that the original study didn't include quite a bit of the Langway site, which is all impervious, which is about half the drainage area. So we've actually added a second pipe of the same size to the drainage system to convey water around this direction. That's all part of the plans, but sparing you the detail, the existing pipe through here we feel is undersized. So we've added a second similarly sized pipe to get water around the site. And again, it was taking a second look, because we're moving right now if the water flooded and overflowed, it would overflow onto the Massett's property. If it floods and overflow under this scenario, it's going to go into Faith Ave this way. Before it either comes this way or goes, there's a low point and a catch basin here that dumps off to the north. So that's something that we included. There's plenty of description and boring detail on that in the reports, but that's part of the plan as well. And you can see it more clearly up there where the pipe would run around, dump out, and then come back to this point.
So some of those wetlands are going to be replicated on that parcel A, is that what
That's
I'm
correct.
saying?
Yep,
Okay.
right here. Yes, sorry. Parcel A would have the wetland replication in it.
Have you put a car carrier through this proposed site plan?
Yeah, we've put a WB50 through it, and
Okay.
and the town. Well, we use the Ashto City Bus, which has been the fire department's I'm not speaking for Auburn, but other fire departments have asked us to use the city bus. It has a long front overhang, and it has a tight steering angle. And so the difference between other vehicles is the front end hits things before the back end does, whereas a tractor trailer drags its tail, fire truck sticks its nose out. So we ran both of those around all the plans we've done.
Okay, through the site and everything?
Yep, through the
Okay.
site, and eliminating that, well, you don't have that problem over here with the exit, but yeah, we wanted to make sure a tractor trailer could get down here and then in. That's why we're showing this as being rubblized or
Cool,
striped
okay.
in order to get a truck along.
Okay. Because that's a big problem.
And a
we have.
tractor trailer can actually make its way around here, so if a delivery came,
Okay.
they could actually pull out here all the way around. That's why these spaces are clipped back. So if there's adequate on-site loading and unloading of vehicles.
Okay, so the tractor trailer you just showed on the curb section would be internal, right? Yeah.
That's all, that would all, right, the new
That's
lot.
that's to the left of the green strip.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's sort of what, it's hard to make out, but these are where the retaining walls are today. So would they be removing this stippled area, this dotted, that's all the existing faith that would be ripped out. Again, to bring it back to the open space. And there's a grading plan because the walls could go away and this could just be filled in. So it can all work. The walls that are in the right-of-way obviously don't remain in the right-of-way, but they could actually be removed and just buried, if you will, as part of this plan. And then this is their interconnectivity between the two sites. And there may be some interest in revising this, and I'll let the Massett speak about future plans for what they have in mind for across the street, or might have in mind. But for purposes of discussion now, they would have one entrance, which you don't see here. It's actually right there. And then they would have the second entrance here and a third entrance on the north side. But the only way to get to this building is to come in through here or to come in this what would become the new drive there and then around.
Does the removal of Faith Avenue make neither of those properties are using it for frontage? I mean, they're using it for access.
No,
but the internal and all one ownership.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I know I would look for and other town officials would. This back site is half a dozen properties right now, maybe.
Yeah, there's something like 6 or 7.
And so
like that.
we'd look for that to be consolidated into a single site. These two we'd look to have combined because they function as a single site currently. And in the event that this parcel is abandoned and turned over, part of our condition is that it be combined through Form A with the adjoining parcel. So ultimately, this would become one mega parcel of all of these buildings. And they essentially function as one building, even though they're separated physically.
Is that what
It's all one
you
use.
want? One parcel for
I mean, I
everything?
think that makes ultimately their life a little bit easier. It becomes one deed, it becomes one tax bill, it becomes one functioning entity.
So
Okay.
we didn't go over things like profile and other technical stuff. I figure you'll let the peer reviewer bash that, and then
That's right.
waivers as well. We covered stormwater in the application. We're meeting with the Conservation Commission tomorrow evening to discuss the merits of this, or at least why we believe it's the best way to reach the desired conclusion, at least on the Massett's behalf.
So that covers it for both of your applications.
Yeah, if there's anything else we can address now, or I think one thing that we haven't dwelled on yet, but it's something that's terribly important to the Massets is, again, if let's just say this all works and everyone in town loves it, including the peer reviewer, and this flies through, there's going to be a period when this road would be constructed and people would be using it like you would on any subdivision. It's a little odd because the other ends are already there, but if this were a new residential road, people would be using it to access their homes. These people will be using it to access their businesses, and I think some homes farther down. This piece of faith will still be a paved road. It'll still be in town ownership, and the Massets will be experiencing a period of time when the traveling public is using this. They have no use or no rights to use it. They also have no rights or any means of using this, so now they've lost square footage for their dealership, and that could be as much as, say, a winter, if they built it in the summer and it sat over the winter and was accepted at town meeting. So there's a good 6-8 months where they're site is now has shrunk physically, and they have no means of making this land up. So two parts to that. One, obviously they're doing this with the intent of somehow acquiring this to make up for that, and they want some kind of assurance, or there needs to be some sort of means defined, I believe, so that their interests are protected, and that it's clear that the town has to offer it however it needs to offer it, let's say when it unloads it, but that the Massets have a shot at it, if you will. That the state's not going to step in and say, boy, we need that for our highway system. So that needs to be fleshed out. And then in that interim period, presuming everything goes forward and we know that they can get it, ideally they'd like to have some right to use it, whether it was a lease agreement or some other means that would allow them to then use this piece of public land, which is not being used for a roadway, to offset what they've given up. And those are the types of things that I think it's mechanics of the process, but it's stuff that's important.
with us.
Yeah, I think that's outside of the
Okay,
planning board's
but I
pay grade,
think
and that's something that we can certainly talk about offline. I think that's more of a town manager.
Sure, but just so that everyone's aware that there's a
Mhm.
bunch of hoops to get through. It's not just the layout of the road.
On your road, if you come down off Route 20, where you got the new road proposed, and you got that first little sliver of, no, it's on the, leave the other one off.
Okay.
Come down, no, not that parcel, the one lower. A little lower.
Keep going,
That-
right there.
No, yeah, to the left of that. The little piece, yeah, that piece there.
That's all part
If
of
that was, right, if that was given up though, you could actually shift the road over to the left a little more and make the curve less severe.
No, the issue is that we're
The what?
using this common corner with land they don't own this piece. This is their neighbor's piece right now. This is Faith Realty Trust's piece. This
Yeah.
dash line going up like this. So that's the point. They can't move beyond that unless they were to acquire other land.
But they could move right up to that square piece. That line there, that red line of the road, you could shift to the property line right there. No, within some.
We need some kind of reverse curve. I suppose we could make a non-centered road that would mean changing the layout
Oh, I
of
just
the
thought it
road
looks
here.
like it would be less of a.
I mean, we didn't evaluate. It might be easier to see on this just because you can see the road on it, but we did not. Or maybe it's even easier on that one up there. But we did not evaluate trying to take this is the existing Faith pavement there. We did not evaluate trying to take that and offsetting it or off-centering it, if
All right.
you will, and coming closer to that corner. That would take the cursor off the road. It would actually put it closer to what you're suggesting, closer to that westerly property line.
Property line.
We didn't look at that. It's not to say we can't. We didn't look at it.
I would
think
talk
it's
to
better.
DPW before you design an off-center road.
Right. We used the stuff that's not mentioned here per se, but it is a 40-foot wide layout consistent with most of Faith. We're proposing a 24-foot curb-to-curb paved traveled way with curving on both sides. There's a retaining wall on the left side because it is in fill, and you'd see that in the profile. We actually graded the right side at 4:1 so that you wouldn't need a guardrail. Guardrails are not a public safety feature by any means. They're a hazard, not a help. And again, that's coming from someone who worked for a highway department for a long time, being me. And that's also selfish for the masses, because if you're going to own a retail business, you don't want a guardrail blocking all your merchandise. So the idea was that it's a win-win. The left side, it can't be avoided. The right side, if you will, the east side, it can be avoided. So we've designed it that way. Concom may not appreciate that, but that's our rationale behind that. That's borne out on the profile in the typical section.
Well, there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of things we gotta get beyond and try to see what we can work out. Get the peer review first, and then that gets you started. And then, do you want to continue the public hearing to? When would you like to come back, and when will you have the peer review, Adam? You said it wouldn't be till the second Tuesday in April,
Correct.
which is about the 18th, 21st, 2nd, 3rd.
When will you get the Conservation Commission?
We're meeting with them tomorrow evening, so we should have a pretty good idea of which way they are leaning, or how we might move forward.
The April 23rd. Does that work for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, the Concom meets, does Conservation meet?
They meet twice,
a month.
yeah.
Actually, I have their schedule, but it's...
So that way they meet the 10th and the 24th
Well,
of
if we
April.
continue it to that, because Graves will have their...
Yeah,
And there's something to discuss. If something goes awry, and we need to change.
Well, and if,
Oh, Adam will know, you
Yeah.
can
Oh, yeah,
converse with
right,
him
we
and
can
work
always
with him.
continue it.
correct,
beyond
you
that
can,
time.
in this, that way, at least we continue it to a date certain. We're not looking at
Understood.
re-advertising. What it'll do is it'll give you time to get the peer review and maybe start some of those other discussions on issues that you've brought up. I know there's been very conceptual discussions. There's never been anything of substance. So it might be time to, even if it's very loose substance, start putting some of that stuff on the table to work some of that out. Because if this board does approve it, then you're sort of working in a process, and if you haven't started that other process, it's gonna delay you further, and that's gonna have additional implications on TCOs and all of the fun stuff that goes along with that.
Okay. Is there any public comment? Specify your name and address.
I'm Jeff Bordeaux. I'm the owner of one of the abutters, Faith Realty, and I have no problems with the concept of the idea as far as to relocate the road. My only concern was that in the current version of the plan, it did show a taking of a line of sight easement, I guess you call it. I'm not really sure what that entails, and I would need to have some idea in a detailed manner as to what they would actually be restricting my property by taking that line of sight easement.
Well, you'll be at the future meetings. I
Well,
would
as long as I'm
imagine.
informed of my.
You can.
That's my only concern, is I have no problem with the idea of what they're doing.
We'll make sure you're
I
informed
just
of everything that's going
have some
on.
additional information as to
I mean,
what
I can give you a
what-
quick overview of what's required right now, if that's of interest.
Go ahead.
Okay. That occurs in 2 locations.
Show us his
Yeah,
property.
Yeah, all of these parcels are yours.
I've actually got a copy of the plan that I picked up last week.
So this is the Johnson Seaman office. Mr. Bordeaux owns everything else all the way out to 20. So that corner that you were just talking about, this little triangle right here, represents if a vehicle is driving this way, it needs to see a minimum distance ahead for stopping sight. So what we did was we evaluate that minimum distance, and because it's on the inside of a curve, it needs to see across his property. So this little sliver, which is about 291 square feet, would be a vegetation management or potentially a minor regrading. But my thought is it's probably a vegetation management, because this is sort of in the cut-fill transition area, so it's more or less at grade, it's more or less level. And that also occurs here in front of the Johnson Seaman property. Again, as you're coming around the inside of a curve, you need to be able to see a minimum of 200 feet along the road as you travel it, so that your vehicle can slow or stop and there's guidance on that from AASHTO. So to see 200 feet ahead on this alignment, you actually look through here. You look across someone else's property. So this parcel on both ends actually help out in some respect, because they afford some of that line of sight area, but they don't cover this part of the site. Now, there's nothing here today. There is a tree. It's a small tree in that area. There's nothing that we located in this area on Mr. Bordeaux's land. Realigning or adjusting that curve and flattening it might eliminate it here, but I don't see how we can eliminate it there shy of moving the road farther away.
Well, you see, he has a concern, so just
Yeah.
make sure, because he's going to be a future, and we're going to be looking for it to be addressed. So
It's gonna be a 25-mile-an-hour road anyway.
The design criteria for the Old Faith was probably sub 20 in that corner, and we've exceeded that nominally there. So this is about a 20 to 25 mile an hour corner,
Right.
based on sight distance and the cross slope of the road and so on.
We'll make sure that you get that.
And so the 23rd, they'll be here. Yeah, if you want to give a call during the day to the office, we'll let you know if they've had some issues and have to continue, or if they plan on coming.
anything else from the applicant?
I think that's all done.
Any other questions from the board?
Not at this time.
Do we
No.
have a motion to
Other
continue the
public comment?
public hearing? I asked
Oh.
for public comment.
That was,
We have a motion to continue the public hearing to April 23rd at, what time, madam?
7:05.
7:05? Wendy made the motion. Do we have a second? Jonathan seconded it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
You have that letter?
Once.
That's the one you wrote all over?
Good supply scrap paper.
I might be making a few times, I don't know.
We'll have plenty of scrap by the time we get done with Adam's bylaws.
Really?
It's easy.
How many can we go
Teasing.
through tonight? Let's see.
Well, your public hearing is the next meeting, so ask your questions tonight,
Okay,
or come and see me.
okay. We'll give you 10 tonight. What are the other ones? How many are there?
I'm not going through it. I put it on there so that you guys had
Right.
a reminder and have an opportunity to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried the I'm going to go through this section by section, and it doesn't work.
No. Oh, I agree with you.
Do you have to do something like that first, just the idea? What is it?
No, that's a signature.
I
won't let them
On the
leave.
back of this one for the Cumberland Farms,
Yep.
I did not participate in that discussion, yet I'm shown as voting yes,
Ah, shh.
and I did not.
No, I know you didn't.
Okay. Point that out.
Was Mr. Weaver's name supposed to be yes?
Did you vote on that one, John?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Should've
there's
been
the,
bumped out.
there's
Last
the,
meeting?
that's the difference right there.
Yeah, it should've
Okay.
been Jonathan. I did
What
not.
did you write down on that? Below my let it go idiot?
I just wrote public comment. I wanted to remind them. I
Oh.
didn't write anything disrespectful.
You know, Rennie starts getting into these little things.
We didn't
yeah,
run any
yeah, I know.
comments.
Yeah. So what is he gonna do
Yeah, it
here?
was for,
He's gonna change,
gonna change Jonathan to yes.
And you are gonna
me
be
to
nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah, 'cause you weren't here.
Right.
Is that right?
how many of these does he, how many of these does he need signed?
One.
Oh, all right.
Don't sign anything yet. It's a new one.
So Wendy, it only took you like 15 minutes to go through the regulations?
No,
How
it
many
took
did
me
you get-
several weeks.
How many did you get done?
I did the whole thing,
Yeah.
but it took me several weeks to do it,
Now,
because you
what
can
was
only
your,
do 10 pages at a time before you fall asleep.
Where were your highlighted comments?
Quite a few questions and comments and,
Well, we're gonna go through it.
yep.
Are you gonna be
Word
done?
by
Are you
word.
gonna
Let
be-
somebody
you're gonna be
read
done
that.
by, are you,
Word by word. I'm just trying to
Listen.
explain to the elderly.
are you gonna be
Fixed.
done? That's pretty good. How'd you do that fast? So anyway,
So we have to sign that, right?
Yeah.
30 minutes.
You don't.
Yeah.
I know.
You can't even read the title.
You were a school skipper.
Yep.
Okay,
I was busy, Ola, and
All right,
Yeah,
are you
Don.
ready?
let's see. Discussion, planning board rules and regulations. You, why don't we go to signatures first, Adam? And is this from
Yeah,
Cumberland Farms
yeah. This
signature?
is the actual.
This is the
That's
one-
the one you should sign, because the one you have, I have Wendy voting
Here's-
yes and John not
Here's the
yes.
one that, that's the bad one. When you're ready.
Now, did you bring the old bylaws with you?
No.
Okay, so you're gonna have those right here while we discuss that, right?
You would like the old bylaws?
Absolutely.
Everybody has a copy of them, to my knowledge.
Well, I know, but we
I
don't
didn't
have them
bring
right
it
here.
with me.
because so much changed, Jim, I didn't even try to go.
Doesn't matter. I'd like to see them.
I'm just saying.
When
Yeah,
I'm
no,
looking at
this
one,
you've
I'd like to
dated
be able
already.
to, I'd like to be
I'm
able
sorry?
to see what we're going from too.
We don't need a date on the back of this
It's not
anyway.
that easy.
Oh, I already did it. You got, and you took your junk one away.
If I'm gonna spend all night here, I wanna see them.
Yeah, did you find that? Did you find, Jonathan? As you read through, you looked and, you know, I'm saying, oh wow, this is how this is gonna be. I thought it was pretty comprehensive. I mean,
I did too.
and I'm saying, I wanted to see, and I said it last week, or the week before, all the other ones and have them, but as Adam said, they're not really aligned.
No,
So
they aren't.
you can't,
Why?
no, they're not. But what I read all looked good, and I said,
Adam's
it looked
trying to
like you
hide
covered.
something, Jim. No,
Oh, yeah, see, I knew it.
see,
Listen,
All in all, I thought they were pretty good. I had the disadvantage of having read them like the day after our last meeting, and then leaving the note page
did you compare one
somewhere
to
in
the other?
Auburn. What's
No.
that?
Did you compare one against the other?
I did
No.
for about 5 seconds,
Yeah,
and
me
then
too.
it just flipping just
too cumbersome to
seemed
try to,
odd.
yeah.
But
I did it in 2 nights. I thought
Yeah.
my eyes were foggy. I couldn't even see when I was done. It was like 1:30 in the morning when I'm done with it.
Yeah.
But I said, if you once you start, if you, it's hard to do a little bit like you did, because once you start, it's
Figure where you
just it's
Well, that's why you see all these little check marks, so I know that I read that and then just kept moving on.
yeah. I made a lot of notes, and I said then I'll arrows to something. I'm saying when I get there, I'm gonna forget what I wanted to
Right.
question.
Did
I
you have
always
Bill
do
read
that.
it to you?
Yeah, he had Phil read it to me. Yeah, are you kidding? He would read two lines of it.
I think we did the signatures, right?
What's
you
his-
guys?
Wendy, what's his cell phone number?
Phil?
Yeah.
774. Oh yeah, we're being recorded. Let me write it down.
We'll do deer track. Talk about deer track. We did the signatures there. Whatever else he's got, and then we'll go to them. So when we're done.
You're looking at midnight. Thanks.
We'll.
Yep.
Ted came
Adam,
in to
if
see-
we're gonna
Ted
look at
came in to
midnight,
see
Adam,
me the
are you
other
bringing
day.
in? Are you bringing in refreshments for us?
Thanks for the receipt.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Refreshments?
Say something. Nice.
Hey, thanks, Adam.
Adam, okay, we've signed the Cumberland Farms.
Okay.
You sent it back on to me. Okay, right there.
Thank you.
Okay, deer track.
Yep, there were some Scrivener's errors on the subdivision plan that was recorded. If I can get this one to go down as I knock Stacy's water over. So they need a new set signed that reflects the correct geometries.
Did you check them? Yeah, so
I
we're-
did. I looked over these.
So all these Mylars are gonna be signed.
Correct.
Can you do something about trying to get some kind of a pen that works normally?
These 3 pens are brand new.
I
So I
don't
can't help
care if they're
operator
brand new, I don't
error.
care if you just made them. Oh yeah, operator error.
You have to hold them straight up and down before they actually write on that
right
Mylar.
board.
Didn't seem to fall in the right spot.
And I don't think pressing them down harder makes them work any better, Ronnie.
But it makes that nice squeaky noise.
Right.
You hate that noise? I'll do it harder.
I think you're ruining the pens by pressing so hard.
That's not what it is.
Different side. I used to go back and forth every other side. Oh no, this one's up at the top.
And there's probably someone at home watching.
Yeah, my father-in-law.
I'm always here. I would never know if it
You
was
mean
on.
your wife's not home watching you?
I can assure you she's not.
My Johnny, he's a TV star. Should I not encourage that?
This one's up at the top. That's Al. Trying to do that to us.
In the middle.
Dig into this.
Taking the bylaws with me, Jim.
I'm gonna do the minutes.
Thank you.
You got the other one? Oh, it's over there.
She's got it.
My other one, right there.
You don't get that back.
How much money I got?
Save his call pen, okay? This is Frank's pen, this is my pen. Get it?
There you go.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Let's just do like 10 pages a week.
Yeah, for the next year.
You know, then you look, I looked through it beforehand to see how many pages only had a little bit on them, like shots or something. It was almost nothing. You had a
No
couple,
pictures?
there's a couple that were blank on the second side,
Intentionally.
and then,
Oh,
you know, ended
You
like
do
this
this
one.
on
with
working hours?
Me?
Or you do this at home on your own free time?
No, I assure you I did this on working hours.
I found
All right, minutes of March 12th, 2013. Any questions, problems, anything? Do we have a motion?
motion to approve.
Second?
Come on, Wendy.
Second.
Were you
We
here?
have a motion and a
I wasn't here
second.
for- I wasn't here for it.
So
You have to do it.
Jimmy seconds. Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It is a vote.
Women's,
What? Were you finished?
women's rights.
Oh, okay.
So I found my major question
Okay.
consistently to be, how does this compare to the original? So my question in not reviewing this compared to that other one, are there any substantial changes in,
Sections 4 and 5 are would be what I would consider the substantial changes.
but as far as like pavement widths or distances between hydrants or other
Yeah,
requirements and
the-
things like that, are there?
On page 30,
There was something on the A&R.
table 1 is a somewhat significant change. The previous right-of-way table was a lot more confusing. It had a lot more variance as for what was allowed. The minor road width was 28 feet, which is fairly excessive for a single-family residential road that's only carrying traffic to houses on that road. Two 12-foot lanes is pretty sufficient for traffic.
The 60 feet, is that a new add in, Adam? Because I
That is
never remember that.
that would be for
at all.
that would be for a major road.
Listen,
that would be
50
like
was the maximum before.
correct, and that would be for if someone was putting in a major collector. It's
And
extremely
at one point
unlikely.
we even had 40 feet right away. I think
Yes,
that might have been.
and in conversations with the DPW, they would prefer to continue with 50 feet.
There's only one way to do this, okay?
A to Z.
Let's just go over page 2. In other words, you can tell us, and we will believe you because you're a very honorable person, all right? What the differences are. In other words, I'm looking at the old bylaws, okay? Now, if I go over definitions, if I say the first item is A, definitions, okay? What did you change in that on the new, because they're not in the same, order. So, but you know what you did. Was there any major changes on definitions?
I don't think that that's not something I'm going to be able to do from memory. I'm not. It would be me sitting here looking definition to definition to tell you what the changes were. What I did was I compiled a list of definitions of terms that I think are pertinent to a subdivision regulation with accepted terminology and definition to that terminology.
Wendy and John, Jimmy, me, Adam, the way I thought we should do it is start with page 2 and see, and then anyone who has any questions on that, we can ask them, and then Adam can address them, and then we'll go on with it to page 3 to 4.
The definitions are typically alphabetical, so that one would probably be pretty easy to use against the old one, but is all the same terminology used in the old bylaws? No.
I don't believe so. I think that there's
when were
probably
the old
some-
bylaws? When were those established?
I think that the cover page says 2003 and it adopted with amendments in 2005.
When was the master plan adopted?
2007.
Okay. So
And quite honestly, the 2003 version reads a lot older than that to me.
absolutely. That's what I thought the first time I read through them, that they were.
They read very 80s.
Yeah, they were very antiquated.
And not that there's necessarily anything wrong with them, they're very gray. They don't give a lot of specificity on
I agree.
on things, and I think that that's the major thing that I've looked to change is
Starts with the front.
here's some additional specificity. This is exactly what we want. It makes the designing easier, it makes the enforcement easier, it makes everything a lot more clear for everybody involved.
Just do 'em.
Okay.
Why don't we start, well, start with John. On page 2, John. You got 2, John? Right there.
Page 2.
Page,
I didn't really have any issues with any of the definitions.
Okay.
okay.
Me, the definitions through page 4 were not a problem.
Well, on page 3, Adam,
Mm-hmm.
parcel. About the third one down.
Yep.
An area of land in one ownership with definite boundaries not meeting zoning requirements nor available for use for the site of principal use buildings.
Mhm.
I didn't understand it.
We had an
As I
example.
thought-
We had an example of it tonight. The piece of land between Johnson Seaman and the proposed road would be a parcel. It doesn't meet zoning. You can't put a principal use building on it.
So, but what my question was is all parcels don't meet zoning. Anything titled a parcel? Did you see parcels all
Correct.
in-
Now, these definitions are for use within the subdivision of land in the town of Auburn. So it defines lot as an area of land in one ownership with definite boundaries, used or available for use as the site of one or more buildings. Thus, in a subdivision, you have either a lot or a parcel. They are not interchangeable for that discussion. And the idea is that in the labeling of
So
such
the parcel
things...
is just as it says, doesn't have the
Correct.
frontage and doesn't meet it. Okay.
Correct.
Plan definitive, couple down from that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to read it so I can remember what I... The plan of a subdivision is duly submitted to the board for approval to be recorded in the registry of deeds, and such plan, when approved and recorded, all as distinguished from a preliminary or other plan. I'm not sure what when I read it.
That's straight out of GL. So, that's straight out of the general laws.
And then plan preliminary, a plan of proposed subdivision or a re-subdivision of land prepared in accord with section 3 to facilitate proper preparation of a definitive plan. Okay, all right. Down at the bottom, subdivision. The division may tract of land into 2 or more lots and shall three, 4, anybody, any questions on page 4?
No.
No. Page 5, anyone?
Yeah, I was, I've already asked this question, the fees, they were increased, and I believe you told me it was a survey of what other communities are charging.
and I can get you a copy of that. I
Okay.
probably told you I would, and
That's fine.
So the fees are.
what I'll do is I'll
Comparable
provide them.
to,
But
They're about middle of the road. They are increasing. Currently, our A&R fees are $25 and $10 per lot,
Okay.
which doesn't cover the amount of time on that.
I was more concerned about preliminary and definitive,
Mhm.
because that could easily add up. And then
That it can.
when you compared it to that of other towns, did you also take into account the consultant review as well?
Most towns
Most
do
towns
include
okay.
include 53G, and I would say that this is probably consistent with middle of the road. It's certainly not the lowest, but it's nowhere near some of the high end that I've seen.
And what are they?
I'm sorry?
What are the fees?
They're on page
I'm looking at the
5.
old, I'm looking at the old one here, but.
The
A fee of $100 to cover planning board costs and associated project plus $10 per lot. What did you increase them to?
is that preliminary that you're reading, or
Approval not required plan is $100 and $50 for each lot.
can
Okay,
I?
so
Which
I'm looking at,
preliminary
Page.
plan or definitive?
it's under the definitive plan.
Okay, the definitive plan,
1,000 and 200 per lot.
or if they
Well-
don't file a preliminary, it's 2,000 and 400 per lot.
But shall not be less than.
But shall not less than $2,500.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's-
Anybody, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, and that's comparable to
It
other
is.
towns, so it's.
What was the increase?
A little bit.
What was I?
What
How
was the
much-
increase between what it was and what it is?
So you're saying it's $110 per lot there,
That's correct.
so it's $1,200 per lot, or 2,400 per lot if there was no
So it's a
no
significant
preliminary.
increase.
It
it is
is.
a significant increase.
I don't know about that. I'd like to see those,
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see those, other towns, what they're getting.
Yeah, I'll send that around.
That'd be good.
I mean, you're
Hey.
talking about,
That's a
it's a huge,
1,000%
Yeah.
increase.
What's the for the consultant review?
Mm-hmm.
What's this?
Ballpark?
Not maybe an average cost of what that. is.
For
Let's
Paul,
say for
for Paul Revere,
Okay.
for which was
Yeah.
9 lots.
Adam, what do you have, the new ones?
No, I
It
have the old
was
ones. Sorry.
Adam, do you have another copy of the old ones?
No, the new ones.
The new ones that you, these that were
I don't.
reviewed?
I
I'll share yours, that's all right.
they
We're on page 6.
I think they paid about 3,500 to 5,000, somewhere in that range, and that's about what we see for large commercial and quite honestly, when you get into subdivision, if you do more than like 2 or 3 lots, it scales. Once you jump up into like 9, whether it's 9 or 50, you're going to be very close in the same range, because there's not a lot more to look at other
Right.
than some grades and whatnot.
Sure. I guess my concern is just that we're essentially at a minimum of about $7,500 to file it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were only doing a minimal lot development,
like a 3-lot subdivision,
Yeah,
$7,500.
right, I mean, it's,
Is
No,
there any- is there- is-
3-lot subdivision would be $3,200.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. And then you're talking about the
Yeah,
and
amending
then
the
the
review as
peer.
well.
But with with a 3-lot, the peer review is going to be significantly less.
okay.
I think that Mr. Lemansky, his peer review over on Linda and I can't think of the other one.
Yeah.
But his peer review
Clear Drive.
was $1,500.
Okay. If you have the information on what other towns. are
Yeah,
doing,
I'll send it
I'm
around.
Curious, I just don't want to make.
And I think one of
Make us less competitive.
the things that figures into it, yeah, it looks like it's, you know, this huge percentage of an increase, but when was the last time these fees were increased?
2007.
No,
3.
2003 was the last time the regs were updated.
When were the last
I
time
would
the
I would
fees-
highly doubt that a $25 and $10 per lot fee was an increase at that point.
We really never did a lot with fees. We
Yeah,
never
I mean,
raised them
the-
much at all
these-
in my 25 years. or
These
21.
fees read like mid-80s fees, as far as what they are. I mean, I've had people come and say, I haven't paid that much since the 70s.
So, you know, and that's the problem, because they hadn't been, you know, increased incrementally over the years to kind of go along with what's
What
actually
things-
happening and what things cost.
But you
Now
know,
it
you don't
looks
want
like
to
it's a huge
penalize
increase.
everybody all at once.
Well,
it is a-
absolutely
it-
not, but at least
well,
they
it is
ha-
a huge increase.
It is, but there has to be something that,
Right.
rather maybe not jumping this, you make an increase every year for several years to get
And
get up to.
that's the other
And that could be
opportunity.
another option.
I guess I don't look at it as penalizing people. This is the cost of doing business.
That's right.
This is something that they recognize in other towns. They come here and see our fees and say, oh, well, isn't that wonderful? I get to not worry about this in my cost of development. I know John's looking at me skeptically, but...
Well, you'd think subdivision would be flying off the shelves at these prices.
Well, but
I
I
get
think
it.
that there's a
Based
lot. I
on
mean,
amount of land
Okay.
left.
we have a lot of other issues as far as getting large subdivisions to come into town. You know,
Sure. No, I just-
infrastructure, size of lots, access to lots, that kind of stuff.
No, I'd just be curious to see
All right,
if you.
let's. We got. This is
We
gonna
got
take
lots
a
of
while.
homework.
Yep.
Page number 6. Anybody have anything on that?
We haven't had a midnighter in a while.
When I come later.
Page number 7.
I'm gonna go again for the inspection fee deposit, the 2.2.5 minimum deposit and the amount equal
That's
to $2.
very standard.
Standard operating, that's what that's my, is this SOP, okay.
And really, what that is right now our DPW does subdivision road inspections, and we collect nothing for the time that they spend doing it. I don't think this is technically going to cover the amount of effort that they put in doing it, but it at least makes some compensatory movement towards it.
Okay.
On page 7, under 224, plan revisions, I put a question mark. Any increase in the number of proposed lots or a significant change to the proposed roadway or infrastructure design as determined by the board shall constitute a plan revision. The fee shall be $500 plus $150 per lot for review of plan revisions. Now, are you considering a revision the same as a modification, like, you know, such as Diamond was talking about tonight, although they're commercial, it wouldn't matter there?
A revision would be
Somebody comes in with, preliminarily with 23 lots, and then the guy says, oh, I think I'm gonna put 30.
Correct.
So now we charge him $500 more plus
Well, it's
7 times 150.
correct, because there's a number of staff. There's staff time involved in that, and there is review time involved in that. And again, that is not an uncommon cost. It's not necessarily, again, the lowest. It's not necessarily the highest.
8, page number 8. I don't have anything, Jimmy. Well, I'm going through this week. Page number 9.
I noticed later in here when you asked for PDF copies of things, but you didn't for A&R plans. Not that that's necessarily a big deal because we don't thoroughly review them, but I
Yeah.
think it was something you wanted to include.
If it's something the board would like, it's very simple to do.
I don't think it costs the applicant anything.
No.
It would make your life easier, so. Mine.
All right, nobody else on 9. Page number 10. Anybody? I got here, J. The following statement. The endorsement of this plan is not a certification that the lot or lots shown hereon comply with the terms of the Town of Auburn zoning bylaw.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got an arrow going down to 3141. The board shall evaluate the A&R plan to determine if it shows a subdivision. The board shall determine first whether each and every lot shown on the plan has the minimum frontage required by the Auburn zoning bylaw on a suitable way, and second, whether vital, direct, practical, or traversable access exists from an abutting way to the buildable portion of the lots. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I have the arrow going between those two. I'm not sure why, but
Because
it just
this
seemed conflicting, or
well, but this
I didn't
board
understand it.
this board is not determining
Something.
that the lot complies with zoning because this board doesn't have the authority to say a lot is fully conforming with the zoning. There's lot regularity factors in zoning, and if it has proper frontage and lot size, the board can approve it, but without lot regularity factor, it may not be a buildable lot without a variance. It may have other issues, encroachment of setbacks. So it's really a catch-all statement that many planning boards either stamp on the plan or have printed on the plan as submitted by the applicant.
Anybody else, anything on 10?
No.
Page number 11.
Item B. The traveled surface shall be at least 18 feet wide and shall be adequate to provide access to each lot by firefighting equipment. Didn't we also say previously that those were going to be, it's going to be 24 feet?
That would be that's for an existing road.
This is
The
existing?
18 feet here is for existing.
Correct.
Okay.
But
So
I
that-
think in a couple of cases, there was one or two, May Lane or something, that we allowed something less.
This
There
board,
could be a couple of extenuating circumstances that could,
the board can always waive portions of the subdivision regulations. This is, in the case of practical traversable access, if somebody comes in with this little rickety cart path, that there's a house on the corner of this cart path and some road that's, a viable road.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's like, I want to put a house at the end of that cart path. And the board looks at it and goes, no way. It's not feasible. This gives them the ability to say, no, you can't Form A that off because that's not a traversable road. Based on this, you need to file a subdivision because you need to build a road to be able to develop housing down there. And it
I just wanted
prevents...
to be sure that that one was,
all right, A, I had a question. The horizontal and vertical alignment of the roadway shall provide a minimum 200-foot distance. This is under approval not required. That's new, Adam, right? Completely?
Correct.
Okay.
And again, that's a very standard clause for
Yeah.
practical and traversable.
No. Now, there's A, B, and then the next one down, I don't know if we're supposed to be C or it's just part of B.
No, it's just A and B, and then it's a new statement.
Where the lots shown on the A&R plan do not have the minimum frontage required by the Auburn zoning bylaw, on one of the above ways, the board shall not consider the lot as having sufficient frontage to allow a division of land without approval under the subdivision control law. I don't know, I was left confused.
Well, if it doesn't meet a public way
With the lot,
certified by the town clerk in place by a previously approved subdivision plan or in existence on the ground and provide meaningful vehicular access, then the board can say that's not a lot that's allowed as an A&R, you need to file a subdivision. That's all that statement says.
okay.
If it doesn't meet the requirements in the above sections, then it has to be filed as a subdivision.
Because the next one I've got here, 3144, The board shall determine whether vital, direct, practical, and transversible access to municipal service exists from the abutting way to the buildable portion of a lot. The access shall be safe and convenient for travel where access is illusory due to the existence of steep grades or other physical barriers, constraints, or impediments. The board shall not consider the lot as having sufficient frontage to allow a division of land without approval under the subdivision control law. So you're saying if it's got, like on Southbridge Street at one point, where Burnap goes up,
Mm-hmm.
there was some, if you didn't go up Burnap and you continue on Southbridge Street, if you go up Burnap, the first little left there's some houses. And they used the frontage as
On Southbridge
frontage-
Street?
Southbridge Street, which
Yeah.
was just ledge. You wouldn't have been able to put an access
Correct.
driveway up there.
You would say that that's not practical.
So
traversable.
now we would be-
Correct. It eliminates people being able to jam
Right,
little
to do
things
that.
in places that might not be the most appropriate.
Okay, anybody else on anything on page 11? Page 12. Anybody anything on 12?
No.
All right, Adam, I had a note here. I just made a bunch of notes and different things. Probably has no relation to this. Adam, submittal of evidence, etc., must be in oh, yeah. This is to tell you that from now on, and we've talked about it 100 times, I didn't know if you were going to have anything in here about that, and I can't remember whether I
About?
picked it. We have a hearing coming before us on a given night, and no new information or evidence presented that night. It has to be in the packet if we want to read it. Can't pass it out at the meeting like we do sometimes now and expect to have us stop and read it, unless it's a simple letter. You know, it's
I don't
it's
think
hard
that you
to
can do that. I don't think that's legal. You're in a public hearing. If someone chooses to present you with evidence for that public hearing, you have to accept it. You don't have to
act
make
on
a
it.
decision on it that
Right,
evening.
because it's
and
hard.
that's more of a board policy than something that
Okay.
fits into the rules and regulations.
Because sometimes we get that.
Yeah,
and, you know,
oh,
we're
I-
trying to decipher it as we're looking at
And
it. You know, and
I agree, and I don't necessarily encourage the board to act on something if they get it that night. It's not.
I mean, you do make recommendations.
oh, we have to accept it. Yeah, I can see accepting it, but then we might have to postpone the whole rest of their process because we need time to look at it and review it.
I was saying you do make recommendations in other places in here, including like that we recommend they go to the conservation committee first and things like that.
You want to add that in as a recommendation?
Well, the
Kinda
only reason
what
I
I
say
was
yes is I think it makes us more efficient, and which obviously reflects on us. If they come in with a piece of information and they provide it to us that night and they're expecting a
Yeah, a
determination,
decision.
it makes us look inefficient for not being able to do that.
I'm trying to determine where to.
Insert it.
Yeah. Let me
under
play
the
around with that, and
subdivision-
I'll.
Under subdivision when they come in, or on the preliminary, or that almost has to be in, maybe in general in the beginning.
I was gonna say in general, yeah.
So then it applies to A and R, preliminary subdivision, and definitive subdivision. All right, page 13.
You could also board action.
Yeah, board action is more the final action, though.
Okay.
I'm actually looking at, plan submission. I don't think that that's necessarily the place. I could create its own.
Similar to wetlands boundary.
Yeah.
determination.
Let me look at it and play around with it. I'll have it in there for April 9th.
And on page 13, anybody? On 321, I just underlined the last paragraph. Just a preliminary plan is required for all non-residential subdivisions. So anything not residential, they have to do a preliminary.
Correct.
Where it's optional on a
Correct.
residential.
And that is straight out of MGL.
Okay. All right, pre-submission review sketch. I have, all I noted, I have some things circled, and I have note, I just thought it was good. When it was written here. Anybody else on 13? 14? Okay. 15? All right, on the top, I just made another note. Things I tried to remember that we've talked about over the years.
Mm-hmm.
All applicants, and I think you do this, Adam, but at one point we didn't. All applicants should be given a comprehensive list to comply with when they first come to Planner.
And then they can
And you
check,
probably,
Checklist.
well,
Some of the
you
things
tell
that they
them
need
they're
to
gonna
do.
do a subdivision, they're gonna build a subdivision, so you tell them, okay, right here, here's something they can take home and look at, items 1 through 10. You know, so now, oh, I forgot, I didn't know I had to have a plan by a licensed engineer or something like that. Now, I don't know if you already did that, I thought you may have, but in the past, we didn't. And under 3291, the board may give such preliminary plan its approval with or without modification. Such approval does not constitute approval of a subdivision, but does facilitate the procedure in securing approval of the definitive plan. And then I have under 3293, the board shall give notice of its action to the applicant and town clerk within 45 days of the date of submission. So the dates, I get confused with this. 45 days, when someone comes in for a subdivision.
when they file a preliminary, so they filed a preliminary today, the 26th of March. From 45 days from today, the clock starts once it's stamped by the town clerk.
45 days from today.
Yes. So
From the date of submission.
tomorrow would be day 1.
Okay.
So
Wait a minute. They bring it in.
they bring it in, they
Yeah,
stamp,
okay.
the town clerk stamps it.
Stamps
They
it.
bring the rest of it up to me. Tomorrow is day 1 of 45 days. So within that 45 days, you legally have to submit an approval or denial to the town clerk, or it's considered approved by means of constructive approval.
Constructive.
Now, when someone continues a hearing, and
We
you
usually
hand
have
them
them sign
that,
that
yes,
paper.
and that's only necessary for subdivisions. There's no time frame for site plan approval, because there's no state law on site plan approval, which is a whole nother issue. But so when they sign that piece of paper, it's like putting a freeze on the time clock. So let's say someone filed today, they come in on April 9th for their first hearing, because you don't have to advertise a preliminary. So they've passed 14 days at that point. So you talk to them and you're like, oh, we have a couple more questions. Do you want to continue? They say, sure, we're having a good discussion. They sign the paper, clock freezes. Clock starts again when you reopen the hearing.
Meeting.
So unless they re-sign, the clock continues. So let's say they say, no, we don't want to continue, we're not willing to freeze the clock. You could deny them on the spot, or you could say, fine, we'll see you in 2 weeks. We still will
Right,
have.
We've come.
We'll
to
still
that.
have 17 days or so after that.
We get to that point a few times with different people. Okay.
Well, it's much more crucial with a definitive than it is with a preliminary.
I just noted on a bunch
Mhm.
bunch of different things here, just things that I wanted to discuss, I guess, but I also made the note that I thought a lot of what I was reading was good. Okay, page 16, anyone? All right, on 3210 at the top, I underlined, if a definitive plan is duly submitted within 7 months from the date of approval of the preliminary plan, the subdivision rules and regulations in effect at the time of the submission of the approved preliminary plan shall govern the approval process of the definitive plan.
If you approve someone for for a preliminary tonight, and you approve these regulations on April 9th, and they file a preliminary
They come
in
under
May,
the old one.
they come under the old one, correct.
Just wanted to verify. 3312, last paragraph. Any unaccepted application may be refiled with no financial penalty within 90 days. After this time, the board shall consider the application a new filing. just question. Any unaccepted application may be refiled with no financial penalty within 90 days.
So once they've filed
You
the
have to really
application,
read it.
they've paid the fee.
Yep.
They don't get the fee back if the application is incomplete.
Okay.
And it gives them 90 days to
And after
finalize
that,
completion.
it's considered a new filing,
Correct.
and would have to pay the fee
Correct.
again.
And it's very uncommon that that ever comes up. But what it's essentially doing is preventing someone from trying to filing something, knowing that maybe a change is coming, and then kind of, oh, I forgot, oh, my engineer, oh, this guy, oh, that guy. It attaches a financial penalty to sort of jerking everybody around.
Okay, the last one, 3313 on that page, 16. I just have a note here. Do we only have 45 days?
No, the Board of Health only has 45 days. The Planning Board has 90 days with a preliminary plan and 135 days without.
You have that, I think, in later on.
Yes.
You have that in there someplace,
Uh-huh.
because
It's, if I don't, it should be in here. It's a very standard.
if you think of it and you don't see it,
Mhm.
we'll maybe remember as we go through.
But it's also state law, so it's not as if it's not in here, we're not covered. But I am very sure that I included it in here.
Because when we get to a meeting, no one's gonna remember every single one of these by heart, even you that deals
No,
with it all the
I-
time. You gotta
If
kinda
you
have
tell
it,
me,
or
if
we
you
gotta
tell me
have
you
one.
memorize this, you're
Adam
lying.
should maybe from now on bring one at the meeting once we get them all finalized. and
Well, once they're finalized, you're all going to get a copy.
have it, but we should have one maybe at the meeting, so we don't have to all carry it, and we can refer to it. Page 17. Anybody? All I did was make a note on constructive approval, because I think we got constructive approval on that project that was over at Ashworth Drive. We missed it. They asked us to extend to something, and we didn't get it in writing or something, and then they came back with, it was whatever it wasn't a nice thing. It's kind of sneaky. I got 3314, 220 days appeal period. There's an appeal period after it's given to the town clerk,
The appeal period begins.
20 days.
Correct.
Is that a general law thing?
Yes. So it's the same thing as the filing. It gets stamped tomorrow. The 20 days starts on Thursday.
Page 18, anybody?
Yeah, I just, I made a note here that, after the plan is approved and then the work is done, tell me about the process after that. I mean, this thing with a wall being built in a public way, how does
all that
How
stuff
does
happen?
all of that happen after the plan is approved? They do is it the building inspector that goes out?
Yes.
Does the engineer go back out? How do we make
that's
sure?
a site plan. So that's unfortunately a little bit different. Once this board approves the site plan, we have absolutely no control over anything. Because at that point, you've done your approval. That's a zoning bylaw. That's up to the building
The
inspector.
enforcement is up to the...
Correct. The
Okay.
building inspector is the enforcing authority.
Okay.
As I said during that hearing, in the span of 6 months, we had 3 building inspectors looking at a single property. Things happened that probably weren't.
But an 80% increase in the size of the building.
Well,
Like
that
a red flag didn't go up.
well,
There's
there's a lot of things. I'd be happy to talk to you about that offline. Some of it is personnel issues. Some of it was systemic issues, and I believe at this point we have a fair amount of that resolved, if not all of it. They're also sort of in a place that's out of sight, out of mind, so it's easy to not have been seen doing some of these things.
It's a little disconcerting when someone comes back after.
Yes.
The
Oh,
board a site approval, and then
We've been
the only
through this
reason why
quite
it
a
was
bit.
it was admitted to was because they had to come back before us to get another approval on something else.
Well, no, they got caught.
Okay.
The current building inspector went out there to do final inspections and said, "What the heck is this?" And that was what triggered the process. Was the current building inspector enforcing the site
All right,
plan?
that's good to know.
So these issues started in 2011, and they sort of perpetuated into the summer, and we've been working with them for almost 5 months now to try and sort this out. And this is actually it coming to a culmination. We've come a long, long way to get that.
Is there a, building on that, so enforcement figures out that they did something, is there any kind of a...
I mean, theoretically, he could have gone back and said, I'm not giving you a CO, you need to take this down, it needs to meet the site plan.
Right.
Practically, that's not in anybody's interest, so we've tried to work with them to say, listen, you guys did this all wrong, and this is what we need to figure out.
Well, is there any way to find them, or is
There
it
isn't.
really
There-
just that taking
Going
it down,
forward,
that's the
we're
way?
looking at the ability to find people, but really,
There's got to be
removal is
some
the
kind of
only...
a tool that you could go into, because other than that, it's the slap on the wrist.
Yeah,
Why would, I'll apply for a 20,000 square foot
Yeah.
building and build a 60.
Right.
well,
And then-
again, I think that there's a lot of things that went into that issue that...
That
They received
particular
a building
one.
permit. which
Yeah,
is-
correct. That are outside of sort of this discussion. I'd be happy to talk to you
Yeah.
guys about it
Okay.
offline,
Yeah,
but
we want to
to-
continue.
Okay.
to give Wendy some comfort on this, this is approved. We hold control of this until it's complete. The bond helps us make sure it's built correctly. We are allowed to, if we choose, hire a peer review construction engineer. I don't think that's particularly necessary with our
You got the money
DPW.
from them for the peer review?
Yes. So the planning board has a lot of control over subdivision. So I hold a lot of control as the agent of the planning board. So we are able to really make sure things are done the way that they were approved. And they have to put up surety, and if it's not done according to the plans, planning board can say, then we're not going to give you your surety back. And everybody wants their money back. So there's a big incentive for people to do it correctly.
Yeah, because there are some places in here where it refers to where the applicant is the one that is responsible to hire somebody that says, okay, they're doing everything correctly. And to me, that seems like it's a
Well,
little bit,
I
you
had
know,
a question on some of those
Yeah,
areas too, where there
right.
was.
It seems a
he
little
picks,
bit-
the applicant picks them in one case.
Right.
We hire them in the other. Some of the code does it. Adam does it. His people do it from the town engineer does it. I think I made some
Well,
outlines.
if we're getting certifications from the applicant, it's generally going to be from a registered professional.
Right, and they're
So-
not going to
And it
risk
says
their
that.
license
Correct.
and...
I mean, their livelihood
right.
is
You would
based
hope
on the
Right, you
stamp.
would
So
hope not,
now
yeah.
there's always going to be a shifty engineer or surveyor out there, as with any profession.
Any profession.
But the majority of them are going to be above board, are going to do things correctly, and we have to, at some point, rely on that code of ethics to, and our own gut feeling on reviewing what they submit.
Okay,
Satisfied?
yes, yes.
All right.
Long answer to a short question.
Page 18, I just had a remark here. Granite required in any cases. But then as we went further on, you had a bunch of things.
Granite
There are some
required what?
cases where it has to be a granite boundary or benchmark,
And then others,
and others it could be a rod or a stake.
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
Page 19,
Is the tree plan consistent with the way it was previously?
It
got an
actually,
extensive list of.
that tree plan may actually be a newer requirement, and I don't think that previously we had a provision for preserving trees.
Okay.
And that all fits in with access and all of that as
Mhm.
well.
Well, you've got in
Architectural
here, which we've talked about
and
before,
ADA and,
that when a tree's, at one point, if they planted them and they died, that was that's a tough lot, we gotta put them back, but
yeah,
I see that you've done quite a bit here, Adam.
yeah.
Did someone do this for you?
Where are we?
I hate giving you credit.
I know you do.
I wrote good beside a million things here,
Tough-
so.
Tough nut.
19, yeah. 20, page 20.
I love the review, the 3.3.3 review by other town officials and encouraging boards to talk to each other
Mhm.
about some of these. I think that communication is key.
That'll never happen.
It'll never happen.
That's right.
Adam, and I got a note here, time subdivision approval lasts.
It's in here. It's as we go forward.
All right.
There is a 2-year completion time limit.
Because all I think of is Bryn Mawr Estates.
You mean from 1964?
From 1964, it was still, no, it was still, it was okay, there was no law, there was no regulation at the time.
Yeah.
21,
Sidewalk. Add something about the applicant and or designee may accompany, but is not mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
And.
You want to add something about that?
Yeah. Applicant and or designee
Mhm.
may accompany. It's not mandatory.
Is the purpose of that to give us the ability to walk on their property and not be trespassing? Is that
Yes.
okay?
And at times, the board may wish to do a site walk.
Yeah, there's a lot of times I think I would like to do that. So
Mhm.
I guess my question is, if we're reviewing a plan, we have the ability to go out, walk
Well,
around, and do we have to announce it?
A
or-
subdivision, you do.
Right.
If you, if you want, I can draw up something that is sort of like an access agreement from people who file everything, and just have them sign that they're granting the planning board and its agents access to the property for purposes of, physical viewing of the site. That's not an uncommon thing. There's a number of boards that I've seen use that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be overly cumbersome. I was just thinking of a situation like the one today.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to go out there and kind of look at that wetland area that they're describing on the plan. See what
I don't think they'd oppose it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a
That was really never a wetland.
Okay.
there's
No.
a
Just trying to understand because it seemed as if it was a. Yeah, I don't want to discuss that. Plan.
there's a school of thought that
It changed multiple times. I'm
It's
just
an
curious to
intermittent.
see.
there's a school of thought that by submitting an application,
Not
There's a-
There's
there's
still
a
distance
tacit
you have to
approval.
stay
I
away
think
when it's an
that,
intermittent stream.
not
that there's a tacit
Hasn't been
approval
a
for you
drop
to
in that thing for 25 years.
go and.
Just didn't want to get arrested for.
Yeah, no,
been
I think in general,
Inspecting, okay.
most commercial applicants aren't gonna.
Okay.
They're quasi public spaces anyway.
Okay.
Mike Frank.
I didn't mean to delay this. And then my other question is the 14-day notice a general law requirement?
Yes.
Okay.
The advertising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Wendy.
Just getting back to that public hearing, could we add, what about posting it on the town's website?
It is.
It's
That's
in there?
no, it's not in here, but it is by matter of course.
Okay.
Because when I submit the agendas to the town clerk, she posts them to the website.
Okay, great.
I noted,
Checking.
you done?
I'm done.
Under E, I got the inspector of buildings, zoning enforcement officer, as to general conformance with the zoning bylaw and to general suitability of lots for building purposes, including the independent roadway drainage system for perimeter drains. And I didn't know if that meant perimeter drains from houses are able to be drained into a drainage system in the road. 'Cause usually perimeter drains are on a housing lot.
Yeah, let me look at that. And I think that's supposed to say the independence of roadway drainage system from perimeter drains.
I'm saying, does that mean, so in new roads, they
No,
gonna leave a drainage ditch so that people can put their perimeter
No,
drains
I
into
think
it?
it's supposed to say that the two are supposed to be independent of each other. But I have to look at my notes.
22, anybody?
You look at this enough and you see what you want to see.
22, I think, was an example of what we were talking about earlier, which is must submit revised plans to the board and town's consulting engineer at least 2 weeks prior to the next scheduled public hearing. And I might give you 3372. Might give you some language for what we were discussing earlier on the preliminary side.
Look at that. I did include it. And I guess my argument would be with preliminary, there's very little information generally submitted.
Okay.
So, and I can add that back in there if you'd like to see it in there. But I find that generally with the definitive is where you're going to see
Yeah, I
the,
mean, I
the
don't know
heavy
if it
stuff.
necessarily needs to be a shall requirement, but if it was a recommends, You just want to give, as the engineer or applicant is reviewing,
Mhm.
reading through these, you want to give them the best opportunity to be successful with our expectations.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, anyone else on 22?
No, we've gone over the board action deadlines. I did have a question on that, but you've clearly explained that.
Page 23.
No.
I just had a note up at the top, Adam, signed by applicant with respect to 3383, and I think we already talked about that when they extend
Mm-hmm.
the public hearing, we ask them to
Fine.
sign.
Mm-hmm.
24. Anybody?
Not an expert on bonding.
No, me either.
I figured you would be our expert on
No,
bonding.
no. I know enough to know, and I don't want to be the expert on bonding.
I got a note up at the top, how long to build a subdivision, but that's the same, it's 2 years.
Yeah, and
We
I'm.
talked about that. but
I'm-
I think it comes up later.
I-
'Cause a
I
lot
know-
of the things I
I
made
was
the
looking
notes
for
in.
that, but I don't recall seeing that. Did we decide, did
Not
we
yet.
determine?
One of them there was one with a date of something had a time period to it.
2 years was a norm.
I thought I saw 2 years on something.
And they
but
had
it
to
comes
reapply.
later. Right, and then you have to reapply.
You know what's coming up on that? That post property up there.
No.
Do you need something in here saying that after 2 years you can challenge the bond? Or
Well, it would be a technical failure, so yeah, I don't think you need it.
So
You
it's
can.
covered in another-
Yeah.
I think, we're gonna read through these and everybody, it's a pain, but we'll be done with it and over it and at least have some knowledge. Adam does a good job of bringing it up at every meeting, what regulations need to be applied or applied to it. But I did have on this page 24, Adam, C, because these bonding things, I think I like the bond the best. You assume the value of everything that needs to be done. You give the bond and you release little bits as they do things. But C was by a covenant executed. I just got discuss here with an arrow on that section. It's a little more complicated than.
Did you make sure that the bond is through a bank and not
Yes.
Uncle Louis?
Yeah.
AAA Massachusetts?
Yeah, AAA rated Massachusetts-based bonding company. The covenant.
We just
No,
did
I'm
when
sorry.
we just
Delivery of a
released
planning
some.
board of an agreement in form acceptable by the town executed after the recording of a first mortgage covering the premises. I thought that I shall executed sufficient secure.
You know what? When this comes up and we have a subdivision and it's time to bond, we can discuss this at the.
I think you should put
no,
it in.
it should be.
Oh no,
in
we
here.
can. No, we want them to put it in. But
Yeah, we
the
do.
discussion.
Letter D is the tri-party, and that's the one that we had the issue with. And
That's
I
right.
thought that I had included it. I must have it in my notes somewhere else. It's supposed to be an FDIC
Yes,
insured financial institution.
yes. That was a big problem.
That was a problem with Prospect Hill.
Yep.
Yeah. And I really thought that I had.
I didn't see it in there.
No, I agree with you. It's not in here, but I wrote a draft of it with it in there. So
So the language.
I thought I saw something about.
In other words, what was
Certified.
happening is they were presenting a bond through a rich relative. Then the rich relative decided not to pay the bond.
well, it was
Similar.
infinitely more complicated than that.
Well, it was, but
That was the
basically,
Reader's Digest
Yeah.
condensed version.
basically it's the same.
So essentially, D will remain the same. It'll say delivery by the planning board of an agreement in form acceptable to the town, executed after the recording of the first mortgage, covering the premises shown on the plan or portion thereof, given as security for advance to be made to the applicant by the lender. And then later on, it'll mention that the lender shall be an FDIC insured financial institution.
That's good.
We
Because
gotta
that's
remember
really-
that any of these, A through A, B, C, D, whatever they are, the covenant, the bonds, the
Mhm.
different types, all equal to litigation. Because it's not, you know, some people have the misnomer that you just say, oh, we got a bond, $10,000, they
Well-
put in the 5 trees, we take $200 a piece, we take them.
B and C are much harder to litigate than A and D. A and D is really where you're scrapping to get the money back. B and C,
What I'm saying is if we can't just pull it automatically, if the person that gave the bond could object each time.
well, you have
And
to
it
have a
could
public
mean-
hearing.
Right, no,
Yeah.
and it could mean litigation.
Correct. But
So it's not a cure-all. but
A
it's
and
better
D
than nothing.
almost assuredly will end in litigation. If you have cash deposit, you're probably shooting 50-50.
The only thing would be to have them give us the cash deposit or put it in an escrow fund, and it's totally at our discretion, but, you know, that's probably not allowed.
Just in
Okay,
that, the paragraph beginning after D, all cost estimates
Mhm.
shall establish, I think it
Shall
should
be.
be
Shall be.
established, yeah. Just a little semantics there.
3313, reduction of bond as surety. It's gonna underline. If release is by reason of covenant, a new plan of the portion to be subject to the covenant may be required.
Nothing wrong
Have
with
we?
that.
No, we've done that, Brad. I think
Release
we
of
released
covenant?
someone that thing up off Bond Street, that road, new road.
Yeah,
up
he had
there.
done work.
And
You
we-
gave him a single lot.
And,
Yeah.
but we didn't have him come in and redo the plan, did we? It said if released by covenant, a new plan of the portion of subject may be required. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, that's yes. You know, he didn't have to redo the plan because it was minor. The
Right,
release.
it was just,
The
that's what I'm saying, maybe is good, because
Correct.
it's-
It
if
gives you the
required
ability.
them to just do a plan,
Correct.
they'd be doing it after each lot.
Correct. Your 2-year time is in section 6.
26?
That's just, you know, what we were talking about earlier, Ronnie, where it says the applicant shall apply with the board as-built plan for each street in the subdivision, along with a statement by the engineer and surveyor employed by the applicant at his own expense, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
So
that's
this was each one of those.
Yeah. It's essentially as-built plans and saying that the applicant needs to pay for it and that we're not going to do it.
All right, let me just look at D here, I got something. $26, anybody else, anything else? No. 27?
Nope.
28?
Formatting ugliness.
29?
Okay, 29.
Now we're getting into the ugly stuff.
Yeah, all subdivisions shall be designed and constructed to increase to the extent possible visual prominence, natural features of the landscape. Are we talking open space? Street layout facilitating solar orientations of houses, use of curvilinear street patterns, and what's the basis for the curvilinear street patterns? Grid, quadrant, conventional loop, and CD cul-de-sacs. Are those not good options? Should it include language about open space, walkability, maximize land area buildable, minimize infrastructure needs, incorporate green open space, reduce traffic, increase walkability? I mean, these are all,
Yeah. I mean, those are all things that we can certainly include. I think encouraging walkability is noble. In a lot of the land that we have left to subdivide, people will fight that. I'm not saying that the board shouldn't do that. I may have looked at this a little old school, so I'm happy to look at some of the changes if it's things that the board wishes to include. If you want to email me that list that you just read off, I'd be happy to work it into that section.
I mean, this all goes to livable communities and, you know, I don't know.
No, I think that they're all. It's a valid point.
Under J, Adam, I just made a note, removal of existing stone walls. And, you know, you're asking, they should be designed and constructed to reduce to the extent possible removal of stone walls. And boundary walls, I believe, by law have to stay. They can't be removed. I mean, if you, even within a parcel, if they're considered boundaries, or if they're an existing, if you're a property line boundary, you can't remove that wall. I think that's a law. I just made the note.
Well, he can
It's
check
not-
on that.
Yeah,
It's not
and-
anything, it's just
well,
a simple thing,
I-
I just wanted to
No,
put
no,
in.
no. I don't want to walk away from Wendy's point because it seems that the rest of the board isn't necessarily reacting to it, and I want to put stuff in there that everybody can get behind because you folks have to approve it. I just write the stuff. You have to actually accept it.
How far do you want to go on that, Wendy, though? I'm not for 100 million regulations, I can tell you that. We've done
Well,
enough
we're
of
not,
them
we're
already.
not saying that it's just designed and constructed to increase
Yeah.
some of those. I mean, you know, we've seen some areas where they've requested not to have the sidewalks because there's no other sidewalks in the neighborhood. But where do you start with that? And it all goes to livability, transit options, you know.
If you got a 200-foot street, Wendy, okay, and there's no sidewalks on the street, you want to add an extra house lot, you want to put sidewalks just for that one house lot? It doesn't make sense. You
Well,
want to put a house...
in that instance, no, it doesn't.
Well, that was Claire Drive.
But these are essentially, these are
This is a statement of
goals.
this is a statement of
This is
intent, not
not-
necessarily you have to do
We're saying you
this.
have to do this. It still gives us the ability to waive that component, but it's something that we want them to be thinking about when they're designing their subdivisions and lot, and, you know,
If we pull this, we have them all in front of us that we can
It's the
be
same, it's
reminded
the
of.
same
Right.
thing with,
not
with
requiring it.
with light poles.
Well, we're saying here that light poles should be underground, that the utilities should be underground.
Right,
Utilities under a ground, but
that's
Yeah.
right,
you're talking about placement of streetlights.
that's right. Now, if you got a 200-foot road and you add another house lot, it brings it up to 350-foot road, should you have another street light, okay? The idea is that, how much do you want to put on the builder for something that really isn't necessary?
But I think
But-
what this is saying
Well, we decide that
on a
at the
new
time.
subdivision,
Yeah.
we want
Well, on
them
a
to
big
come in with the
subdivision,
goal
that's a different
of
story.
Well,
Sorry,
yeah, and this is
Right.
not a.
creating a walkable community
Correct.
with green space and doing all these things.
These
Right.
are
There's
our.
no-
Each
I have no
occasion we
problem
talk
with it.
about
I
it.
have no problem with a big subdivision doing that, of course.
There's no
Well, and that's, you know, I mean, this is what we're talking about is, in general, the subdivision design, the things we'd like you to think about in
Yeah.
this subdivision that you're proposing is there opportunity for open space? Is there opportunity for walkability?
Well, we
How
have
does
that
it
already.
But it's not written anywhere. So I think what Wendy is suggesting is
He's
that
asking that we
as
include.
as a statement of intent, we
Because
include
several
those
times
things.
things
Well, up
have
to
come up
Pappas
during a
Park, for
meeting.
instance, there was no design of any sidewalks up there at all. Okay? And the planning board decided that they wanted sidewalks up there. So in that particular case, the planning board can say that, okay, we want sidewalks in that particular development.
Right.
And,
Everything
and
is-
now there's sidewalks up
But
there.
again, it's just simply to have
To
them.
have it in there and
be
let them look
in
at it.
thinking about it.
Can you email
Right.
me that list and
Sure.
I'll work it
Absolutely.
into that
Absolutely.
section.
Well, a lot of times during the course of my time here, things would come up, and when we'd ask the planner that it's not in there. It should be, but it's not, and it's a gray area. When we rewrite them, we'll put them in. I was just trying to remember a lot of things that came up that we
If
could.
that's waiverable, then I don't have a problem.
But this isn't. It's
not
not
even
even a
a
regulation.
Right.
It doesn't even
This isn't a
require them to
regulation.
do it.
Right.
It's not.
It's a
just
statement
look.
of this is ideally what the planning board wants to
What we
see
want you to
happen.
be thinking about.
Yeah, these
Yeah.
are. This is
That's
the
no
direction we
problem
want
with
people
that.
to go.
I have no problem with it.
Livable
All right, 30.
communities.
On
No.
29.
Yep.
What does curvilinear mean?
Oh yeah, I had that. Where did I?
Yeah.
I wrote that
Doing
somewhere.
one of these, it's not
Like
necessarily.
think of driving through a
You want
mountain
straight
pass.
roads.
Yeah.
Got it. Alright.
Yeah, that's
What
why I
is it?
said,
You want straight roads. How does it?
Well,
there's a
in a
school
couple
of-
of
there's a
spots, it
school of
it
thought
says
on it,
use
you know what I mean?
curvilinear street path.
Well,
Right, and
it's
I'd
a
like to see
traffic
that.
calming. The thought is it's traffic calming because you don't get a straightaway. You're constantly
increasing the amount of curvilinear.
correct.
yeah, So you're
Right.
slowing down the traffic because you're making them do one of these. Yeah,
Okay,
It allows little Jenny to play ball on the street.
not really.
Well, not really, because
No,
you
I
can't
know.
play soccer on a
30?
curve.
Sure you can. You
anything
just have
on,
to get creative.
30, just again, that
60
reference to the
feet.
current curvilinear street layout whenever possible,
Where is that?
under A.
Okay.
So that's really a recommended, okay.
so curvilinear is just straights and curbs
Well, there's
instead of all
There's a
straight.
school of thought on, there's several different ways you can do traffic calming measures within a subdivision. And it's not that's not the most efficient for the infrastructure. It causes
Right.
you actually to
Increase pavement.
increase, yeah.
Right.
And so there's better ways of laying them out and having traffic calming measures than the curvilinear
Okay.
design.
I get lost on windy roads. So.
Page 31. Adam, I got a note, copies of this after approval, this rules and regulation, they go to our consultants, right?
Yes.
So they have them to
Correct.
reference all and
Yes.
whoever we use as consultants.
And generally what I'll do is, there's probably 4 engineers and 2 or 3 lawyers that we see regularly. I'll generally either email or print a copy out and send it off to them just so they're aware of it.
Just a couple of housekeeping items on 31. Handicapped is no longer an acceptable, that's not a PC. It'd be an individual with disability, accessibility.
Okay,
Where's
we-
that one?
Under
Read.
number 3.
Footnotes.
Yeah, we don't use the term
Okay.
handicapped at all anymore. And again, if we, at some point we really want to create walkable neighborhoods or pockets, it would make sense to require curb cuts and signalized crossings in locations. And again, even if it's not in an area that would connect
They're doing
to
that in
another
Shrewsbury,
area
you know,
with-
they're putting
with
the
sidewalk.
yellow metal things down there.
Yes, and you know what the issue with it is, when you have a street crossing like this, those are typically for visually impaired. It's a tactile, so they realize that they're coming to a crossing. But what they're doing is, in an effort to save money, is when they come up to a corner,
They're chopping them.
they're chopping them on, and so the idea of a tactile curb cut is to provide a direction for a person with visual impairment. So
So
when you
they
put it on a
eliminate
rounded
the-
corner,
yeah,
they're
they-
sending them out into the middle of the
road.
intersection.
Mm.
So that's something that I had marked down, later on, when we do talk about curb cuts, it has to be so that they're directional, and not
Okay.
chopping off those corners to save money.
Adam, on the chart, number 4, sidewalks if required, 3 with curbs.
So it's referencing note 3, which we just talked about. So it would reference sidewalks shall be required to be constructed on both sides of the street. Curb ramps for persons with disabilities shall be installed where curbs are provided to allow for continuous movement of persons, probably with
And to
disabilities.
sidewalks on adjacent streets.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the subdivision of the sidewalks on adjacent streets. So it's just saying that so that number 4 also references note 3.
Page 32.
Well, when we started talking, you were saying that there were a lot of changes in section 4. and
Mhm.
We did page 30. Was there anything on 31 or any of the upcoming pages that's substantially different? If,
The
if
chart.
there is, maybe just point them out. as we
Yeah, I
go.
mean, the chart has. Actually, I don't think there's anything really on the chart other than the 24-foot minimum, but I think that was
Which
pretty
you see,
standard.
okay.
We had decided a long time ago we were gonna go to, after that last development, we were gonna go to 24 feet.
Yes.
So no, I mean, I don't think anything major outside of the layout. And again, I think that there's some more detail in general. I think it conveys generally the same tone
Okay.
as the previous. Build the right streets.
Everybody all set with 31? 32?
Yep.
Something? Wendy? No. Page 33.
4.2.5.2, minimum pavement width shall be 26 feet, and it's 24 feet in parentheses.
Right, I got that.
Thank you.
I made a note, 2 exceptions, 18 feet, but we talked about that a little earlier.
Yeah, and
It
that's,
was on the,
I don't think that we're looking to allow anyone to build new roads at 18 feet.
No. Not new. Where the only, and then B, and the 4251B, in the last words in B, divided roadway, but we've never done one of those yet, like a boulevard. I think that, is that the boulevard concept?
Yes.
Concept you're talking about, there's none in Auburn.
No, but if you
Just-
decided you
no,
wanted
no.
to,
There was an application for one once, that probably would have been all right. Anything else, anybody on 33? 34.
Just under 4.2, I just had a question, 4.2.7.5, the dead-end street, paved turnaround, 120 feet, is that big enough for a fire?
yeah.
Okay.
That's the radius you used on several other occasions
Okay.
in here.
All right.
On 4272, a dead-end street shall not serve nor provide access to more than 10 lots nor have a length of greater than 500 feet. Currently, we have 800 feet
That's correct.
for a road with a culvert, so you shortened it to 500.
Correct.
Any,
Based on,
I'm just curious why.
In my research, it seems that most people are shortening their dead-end roads. And I think some of that is to prevent having large tracts of land eaten up by a single lollipop that goes in 800 feet. I'm,
But we could waive that.
if you chose to.
I don't know, I'd like to see it stay at the 800 feet, and then, well, if you do it at 800 feet, then we have to allow it. I didn't think the 800 feet was bad.
I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I'm merely saying I've
Because
seen...
there's some situations like up off Brook Street where they went down and to the pond there, and it was kind of the only alternative to do. They weren't big wide pieces, and they went down, and we actually gave them a waiver, I think, on some of them.
Yes, he's
to go
just over
1,400 or
1,000.
1,200 feet or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, because you're going to have the 120-foot turnaround at the end. I think that's the key.
But in that case, the board would probably look at the extenuating circumstances and
And could
approve it
waive it.
anyways.
Mhm.
I'd like to see it stay at 800, unless you.
And I guess my
and then
feeling
waive it
also
from
is
there
that
if we have to.
if you are giving waivers and you are giving it greater than the 500, you have the ability to negotiate for other things from them. So we're willing to give
Okay.
this waiver if you provide
Yep.
additional walkability or things of that nature. I'm a big fan of trying to get quid pro quo out of people. You know, yes, our regulations say this, but
Isn't that what we're trying
Right.
to avoid by the gray area?
no, not really, because because if they don't want to do that, okay, this is our regulations.
you always want
Yeah.
to have the.
You know, you have the option of if you're going to provide us additional amenities as part of your development, we may look at relaxing this.
I gotta be honest with you, I don't,
I think we could
I
still
don't
get
go-
it with the
yeah.
800 feet on the few occasions that it comes. I'd like to see it at the 800.
I would too.
That's two.
Um,
I mean, I'm
it's fine.
We haven't had a problem with it
I
so
prefer,
far.
yeah, I prefer to leave things.
Here's what I don't like to get into, that looking to try to get more out of something, that might have been in the past, but today everybody's got to be upfront. And there can't be any transparencies, and I think a transparency would be, a non-transparency would be the fact that, okay, let's cut down on the things that are normal or whatever that we've had in the past to try to get something out of somebody. I
I do
don't.
like that idea.
It's like
I don't think-
ransom. It's like a ransom.
I think that you misunderstand what I'm saying.
No, I think Adam means to get something for the betterment of
What
the
I'm-
town within
Well,
reason.
no, but you can get that. You can get that without holding something over somebody's head. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay?
Well, but
we
I-
got enough government in our back pockets.
Well, I philosophically disagree with your point because
That's all right.
regardless of whether it's 500 or 800 feet, we still have these rules. People still want more than what's in them. So we're being upfront about this is what we want to require. So I don't think it's a non-transparency. I think it's a general disagreement about a 300-foot length.
Well, I'd like
again,
to leave it. If
800's fine.
We've left everything you've done so far. 500, I like to leave it at 800.
That's fine.
Okay. 4273, oh my God. I just wrote good. 4275, can this be waived? Dead-end street shall be provided at the closed end with a paved turnaround having an outside right-of-way diameter of 120.
Anything
Must
and
the board
everything
require
can be waived.
Diameter. By us, on these
Correct.
rules and regulations.
Correct. I
And
would
why
generally,
I did it, because there's some dead-end streets that don't have like a cul-de-sac at the end, they're in existence already.
Correct.
I
But
just had,
those generally aren't going to fall under subdivision control unless they're extending beyond.
okay, page 35.
Just under 4.3.1.1, the last word shall be installed to have a 6-inch surface reveled.
Revealed.
Should be revealed.
Yeah.
And also, under the 4.5.1 open space, the board may, by appropriate endorsement of the plan, require that no building be erected upon such park or parks without its approval for a period of 3 years. What does that refer to? What does that mean?
If someone chooses to give you open space, you can say that they can't build anything on that for the 3 years, and at the end of the 3 years, they can look at it. Let me look at my notes again. It's been a while.
Yeah, that didn't make a lot of sense to me, and I'm not sure what it means.
In this, anybody else, anything there? In this section, Adam, I made a note. Restrict or control what land is given for open space. Let's discuss. And what I mean by is, you know, in open space, a lot of times, or we've had instances where they come in, and all the land that they're going to give for open space is swamp, straight up hillside, or completely or ledge, unusable land. So, and then it doesn't even have any, there's no benefit to the people in that subdivision to use it, or to the town or anyone else, only the developer. And it just seems to be a way to circumvent the open space, to get open space, because you had square footage of land, but it was not usable. Can we put something in there that at least says 50 or 75% of it has to be usable and can't be, I mean, or some reasonable amount, and also we can waiver it too, because if it's got a
Just say
nice pond
accessible.
on it. Well, something that limits it to, you know, giving us,
I agree with you.
I want to just go back for 1 second because I can answer Wendy's question. We cannot require them to construct a park. That's not legal under MGL. So if you go to 454, we can require that they not build anything for those 3 years, and 454 gives us the ability to look to acquire that within that time period as a park. So if we say this lot, center of the subdivision, is where we want you to set it aside, it has to be this big, it gives the town 3 years to identify funds if they so choose to purchase that. After that time period, that person can then look
Yeah,
at
'cause
either
that's my note, was
redividing it. Yeah,
they could build a house on it?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
they
I
can
get it.
if the town does not acquire it.
Okay. All right, so it
and
goes
you
along
look
with
at
that.
putting something in about the, you know,
Well,
think
yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
How-
Well, especially if you start using the open space provision here, because this essentially requires them to set it aside, and if the town doesn't purchase it in 3 years, they're then able to develop it. So it's not to their benefit to take a bunch of junk land
Yeah.
and set it aside, because ultimately they're going to continue to own it, and
no,
they're
it
going
isn't,
to.
but there are some who didn't have that
There are.
intention, that I've seen it in the past. So if you can tighten that up a little bit.
Well, I think a lot of the junk land comes in the open space residential developments. where they know that they're going to just give it up as fee ownership to someone else.
Oh, that's what that's,
But the open space residential, that's in the bylaw. That's not laid out through the subdivision. The provisions for
oh, so yeah, there's a difference. Okay, 36, anybody? I just had under 4811, all required, this should be placed under. Nope, that's good. 37,
4.812, is that consistent with what we require now?
yes.
yeah, I question that too. I
You
mean,
know,
you gotta,
it's essentially
that could
a
be
stub.
expensive. Well,
Do they
maybe
have
not
to
really.
size
If the
it?
last lot, the street goes up to the last lot, maybe you only gotta go, they might stop it in the middle of that lot, and then if the property lines, you have to continue it over to, but you don't know where the other parcels lots are gonna be, or how their streets are
Well,
gonna be
No, I
laid
just
out.
looked at such grade and size which will allow for proper extension at a later date. So I didn't know if there's an owner with a large tract of land behind you who could potentially subdivide it, do you have to provide?
Well, stubs to them for where the road.
No, but it's
But a
it's
pipe-
not a stub. It's a single pipe.
You go from a 24 to a 36-inch pipe for the length or something like that. Is that consistent with what we do now?
Yes, I believe it is, and I think that it would be unlikely in most cases that there would be that big of an increase.
Okay.
You know, especially for something like water. Water main's not going to size up.
Okay.
You know, it's going to be an 8 anyway, and the sewer is generally going to. Sewer is really what you'd have to worry about, and I think it's going to be a majority of it is going to be the pitch of it, to make sure that you're not ending it
Did you
almost
go
flat,
forward
so
or-
that you're giving it enough.
That makes sense.
4814, well, it's the same thing, and we can waive it. 4821, I just had a question. If a public water system is located within 3,000 feet of the subdivision, as measured along public ways from the end of an existing water line to the proposed subdivision entrance, or other cases where the board deems it appropriate, all lots shall be connected to the public water system by the developer unless the water district specifies otherwise. Design and installation of water systems shall be in conformance with the rules and regulations of the water district and paid for by the developer. And 4822, if not within 3,000 feet, every structure shall be connected to a source approved by the Board of Health and the Fire Department.
Now, I had a conversation with the fire chief today about that, and the source approved by the Board of Health is generally going to be a well. The issue is fire protection, and there's I believe, going to be a bylaw proposed by the fire department about cisterns and dry wells in the case of public water being unavailable. And so I think what the fire chief wants to do is try and make this section jive with that, so that the board is looking at fire protection of roads that are not serviced by public water. I think he's
When you say fire protection of the road, so that he
of
can
the
hook-
subdivision, so that
of the
somebody can go
subdivision.
out there, and if a house is on fire, they can hook a hose up
to something.
to something and start
The
suppressing the fire.
Okay,
So-
that doesn't necessarily mean sprinkler and houses.
Well,
and
I mean, the
that's
sprinkler
gonna
could
probably
be
in his bylaw.
I don't believe sprinkler is going to be in his bylaw.
No.
I haven't.
How many gallons do these trucks hold that we have many of?
I am not a fireman, so I don't know. But again, I think that there's an issue with response time, jockeying equipment, and I think that what we're looking at is having an equity of fire protection amongst those who are within water districts and those who are not. So I think what the fire chief is looking for is for the board and the chief to sort of agree on what would be an acceptable water delivery vehicle for an
He brought up the cistern.
He did.
Now that's, cistern is just like a giant underground water supply.
Correct. It's apparently they've gotten a bit better recently, and it's a enormous concrete vault that's buried and filled.
That we have to put in.
That the
Somebody's gonna put it in.
well that the developer
would
would
put it
be
in.
putting
My
it.
question is, would it then become publicly owned?
Correct.
So it would then become similar to the way a public water main would
Correct.
for a hydrant. This
Correct.
would become,
And what's the cost of something like this?
Probably significantly less than bringing water from more than 3,000 feet away.
Well, he can come in and talk to us. He said he was coming back pretty soon anyways, at some point.
Well, I think
To
it's
talk about the system. To see, what we're looking at, is it like the size of a normal 30 by 60 ranch house cellar hole, or what? You know,
yeah.
how many
I don't think
gallons
it's.
of
I
water?
think it's 20,000 gallons.
Oh, all right, I'm thinking something even bigger than that.
And how about the other towns in this area? Do they have that?
Some of
bylaw?
them do. Some of them have
And how,
sprinkler bylaws.
then also, how do we refill the cistern?
Um,
Be filled by its own well that,
Well, there's a few ways to do it. I mean, some refill by stormwater. Some they'll bring a pump truck in and they'll fill it from a truck.
so this is a new requirement.
He's,
Well,
he-
and-
It's
well-
not a requirement.
it's not a requirement, but he's thinking about it, you know, it might,
Well,
in
he's-
certain cases, it might be all right.
he's looking for the board to.
No, but I mean the 4.8.22
Yes.
is a new requirement. Okay.
Correct.
You know, if there's a fire and the next house gets caught on fire with it, and he already got the tank trucks there, I mean, if it's not this gigantic, and the developer knows he's got it going into it, you know, you can spread it out between the houses, and it's not this
Yeah.
400,000 gallon thing, I think it might be good to have it there. It's another water supply where there's no hydrant.
Right. I guess my question, I completely understand the want or
Totally against
to
it.
have essentially once the private developer is done with this, they save the money of not having to connect to the system.
Correct.
And then the owner who later purchases that from him has
Zero
limited
fire protection.
Fire protection.
Mhm.
I get that. I guess what I was just curious about is if we could spell out what we would require a little bit more. So if we
Well,
use
and
this
I
cistern-
think that's what he's looking for is for the board and he to
okay.
sort
It
of
just seems
flesh
to have
that out.
an open-ended.
Yeah, and I
regulation.
think, I mean, there's a couple of ways we can do this. And what may be the most appropriate way is to do a accept the regulations, if the board feels that that's appropriate, and then you can always modify them based on a future discussion, because it seems like that discussion could take a series of weeks and months.
Once we go through these, you
Correct.
make some adjustments. It's us that votes on them.
Correct.
And then it's presented to the town clerk,
Well, yeah.
Who-
Once you vote on it, it goes to the town clerk and it's legal.
and it's legal. So this isn't anything that has to be approved by the legislature
Correct.
or the town
Correct.
council or anybody else. It's us. So it should be always subject to us
Correct.
making an amendment or a change
Yes.
to one
So
at a
you
meeting.
can amend these
And
6
put
times
in
a
a
year
little
if you wanted to,
amendment
as long
into
as
the-
you post a proper public hearing. And I guess what I'm saying is, it sounds as if the conversation about what the acceptable fire protection between the chief and the board is a larger discussion that may
Okay.
have, and if that's not what the board wants to do, that's fine. We can continue that hearing until such time as that discussion is had. But
I think
Okay.
the process you outlined is fine. Yeah.
Anybody got anything else on 38?
oh, we're on 38 now.
Not on page 11 anymore. Ab.
I have trouble keeping up.
We're not on 64 either.
That's right. That'll be around 10 minutes to 12. 39.
Sleeping in
Anything?
my car.
No.
Let me just see what I got
Me.
drainage there. I think I meant this. Now, did Bill Coyle look at
Yes.
a lot of this?
I
Like
worked
see
with,
here
I
on
worked with Bill quite a bit on
I
this.
figured you must have, because on 4866, I think that's good to put another sub-base under the normal base, if it's determined that it's wet. Have a drainage layup of, below the gravel sub-base. 4866.
Hey, I proposed that. He gave me the numbers.
No, that's
It's not only giving you
go to
credit.
Jade Hill. I mean,
Jade Hill,
there's a lot
Montclair
of
Drive is a
Montclair
nightmare.
Drive. I mean, that's
They built it on clay.
that's right. That and old dead roots.
40. Anything?
Just two quick things. The maximum slide slopes 2-to-1 and 3-to-1. Those are consistent with what we have now.
Mm-hmm.
And then on 4925, the board seems to regularly detest wooden with metal post fences.
Right.
If we're gonna ask
We
them
like
for
the
a
cyclone
vinyl
fence.
anyways, should we have it?
Cyclone with vinyl.
I mean, we're gonna end up requiring it anyways. So.
Do you add that in,
Um,
Adam?
Now, it says the fence may be chain link or vinyl, and which I think depending upon the area.
Well,
could
chain link,
define-
I think, is vinyl. Well,
No, he
It's
wants
wood-
chain link with vinyl slats.
with vinyl
Okay.
slats,
So we'll just put that as.
but
Is
not
what
a
you
not a white vinyl fence. It needs to be chain link for the
Chain link
protection,
with-
because that other stuff.
with
Right,
vinyl.
It doesn't
Yeah,
last.
vinyl slats.
Doesn't last.
41.
Oh boy, 41.
That's not a good sound.
Yeah. Just wanted to put some language in that clarifies what it says that, provided for sidewalks shall be provided on both sides of the street. Is
Mhm.
5 feet wide. The total sidewalk width is the paved area measured from the back of the curb to the right-of-way line. And that they shall conform to all
ADA requirements.
ADA access board requirements, yeah. The sidewalk should be made firm, stable, and slip resistant, should comply with maximum cross slope requirements. And also in 4.10.2, it says sightlines between bounds shall not be obscured. Utility poles shall not be set on a right-of-way sideline. I thought all the utilities were supposed to be underground.
I underline that too. I don't
Yeah.
know why.
They're supposed to be underground.
They are. Well, and they're. Well, but there's also going to be lights. So lights qualify as utility poles.
Okay.
So
And those have to be not in the sidewalk.
not on, not in the sidewalk and not on the sideline.
Paved, right.
Correct. So they're within the right of way, not on the sidewalk, not on the line of the right of way.
Right.
You ran through a list of stuff for 411.1. I only caught like a quarter of it.
Total sidewalk width is the paved area measured from the back of the curb to the right-of-way line.
Can you email it to me with the other
I
stuff?
can. And the other thing too is, anything with decorative pavers or beveled edges or anything like that, those surface treatments are right out for
Oh yeah, we.
accessibility. And you can use them at the edge as a tactile, but
Mhm.
it shouldn't be on the area where they're traveling.
And we don't want them anyway because we don't want to maintain them.
Right, brushed concrete surface, preferred surface.
I think we've got bituminous as the surface that we,
Okay,
and that's more for
I'll send you that.
equal maintenance.
Yep. And when they talk about, the curb, I don't even think they reference curb cuts in here, do they?
No.
Yeah. I'd like to put something in there about the directional curb cuts.
Okay.
With tactile.
So you're gonna have to have a tactile curb cut at every driveway.
It would actually just be at the main
Entrance.
roadways.
Okay, so
But they-
major intersections, not every curb cut.
Right. But
Yeah, it would be all the crossings.
yeah.
Okay, good.
So wherever there's a crosswalk,
Wherever
there'd be a
there's a street
directional
crossing.
tactile crosswalk.
Okay.
Right.
Or curb cut, rather.
Right. But aren't the sidewalks constructed in such a way in a subdivision where, especially if there's a driveway that comes through the,
It should
It's
remain,
normally-
it-
right,
the
Remain-
sidewalk should remain level, and the driveway should cross over and
Okay.
drop from there.
Adam, I had a note at the top, acceptance of road by town, set time limit for developer.
Yep, that's in
That too. I didn't see, where is that?
section 6.
It's in okay.
Yeah, the completion timeline is the first.
I just made the notes as I
Yep.
thought of them.
Yep.
And I didn't know where they were gonna be, but
What is it?
we'll get to it.
I'm sorry?
at 6.
What is the time limit?
2 years.
And
Yeah,
on the
because we don't want it, that'll eliminate what
Yeah.
happened on Old Town.
Absolutely.
on the bounds, the length exceeding 800 feet, is that
Mhm.
consistent with what we have now? And
Yes.
okay.
Now, is that 2 years from the date of the project starting, or from the date of
2
the
years
finish?
from the date of endorsement. The subdivision is to be complete.
Date of endorsement, what does that mean?
That's when you guys sign the plan.
That he can get, and then he can get going, it goes to the 20-day,
Correct.
the night we approve it
No,
and
you
sign
don't
it.
sign the plan until after the 20-day appeal period, and that's when his 2 years starts.
That's when his 2 years starts. And he's gonna have the subdivision done supposedly. by
Correct.
that time. Okay. Page 42. Nice list of trees.
The 40 feet interval for trees is consistent with what we have now too.
Well, like Norway maple, that should be minimally, it probably should be actually 60 feet on center. They're not, they shouldn't all be the same. Chinese elm, I don't know. I think a lot of
40
these,
feet's about what we have now.
they intersect. If you look in the city sometimes, they're on 50 feet on center and they're still
That's something that we
those
can...
big.
But I mean, that can be looked at
Yep.
on a case-by-case basis if
Absolutely.
somebody...
But I wanted to talk about it a lot tonight, because then it'll get close to midnight.
You guys want to stop for dinner? Come back?
Yeah. Oh, we're going to adjourn in a few minutes.
You gonna take us out after?
Yeah. That's just what you were looking for. A 4116. I like what you put in.
Yeah,
Prior to
the dead or
acceptance, all
diseased
dead or
trees,
diseased
yeah.
trees shall be replaced
Yep.
with healthy stock. I don't know, I underlined the other one, but. We decide these at the time. Okay. 43. Anybody? 44.
This whole section is new, John.
Okay.
It's, again, substantially similar to the general requirements as they were outlined, but as you can see, it's a bit more meaty as far as getting into the specifics of it. And a lot of the stuff included in here is from
Do you want to shut that window? Want me to shut that window?
the Mass DOT
like it.
Okay.
It's keeping them awake.
manuals.
Wendy.
Page 45.
Just the construction approval, I think that's some good language.
Yep. .46. Anybody? On 5213. Oh yeah, 5213, section B. Where cuts are made in ledge, other slopes may be determined with the approval of the highway superintendent and the engineer. With terrain this necessitates greater slopes, retaining walls. I underline that with respect to the dealership down on Route 20 that
20.
had the ledge outcroppings.
Yep.
Mm.
And you
They
brought 'em
already,
to
they
question.
already admitted, they're gonna do something about that. I talked to the attorney,
Okay.
and he agreed that that outcropping was not shown.
I'm
on
not
what
sure
we-
if, right, it has to be
He
agreed, there's
agreed,
no other way, it
there
is
was
not
a
on there.
contiguous slope from one end of the lot to the other, and there was no outcroppings. So
Adam,
they said they were gonna take care of it.
You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I'm not sure if that's what you're referencing here,
Well, it's
He got lucky.
but if not,
it's
if
two
not-
very different situations.
Yeah, I didn't think it was exactly, but it reminded me
Well,
of that situation.
Yeah, and essentially what this does is it says they've designed this in the construction. If they find something that is different. They will consult the DPW because they will be the long-term maintainer of that roadway, and they will have the opportunity to review and
Okay, page 47.
It's the third time I heard that clock.
You got 2 more to go.
Fourth time we've heard it.
I'll have the senior van pick you up. Anybody with anything on 47?
Nope.
I got a note here, Adam. Has this been reviewed by town engineer?
yes.
A lot of that. Yeah.
Okay.
48?
This whole section was developed with the DPW.
Oh, great.
Anybody on 48?
Consistent with what we have now.
No, 'cause
No,
we don't have
probably a
anything
lot
now.
added
Nothing
in.
on that.
No, but
All
I mean,
new-
this is
Standard
all
street standards.
standard paving. I mean, again, it's all very close to or straight out of.
But it
Mass
wasn't in
DOT.
the regulation.
Correct. And that was a lot of the problem.
48?
I have no problem with that whatsoever.
Anybody?
so the 2.5 and the 1.5 is
Yes, that's.
I thought
we
it
we
said 1/2, and
we
I had to
have-
read it again.
we have 2 and 1 now, and accepted standards in general are 2.5, 1.5.
Adam I. Paving shall occur only under suitable conditions. Air temperature shall be at least 34 degrees. Can we check on that, even though Bill looked at it? It just seems, I wouldn't want to be paving at 34 degrees.
Probably feels nice standing over that hot
Oh, I
asphalt.
know, yeah, to the guy doing it, but cement work, any of that stuff, that's so close to freezing that.
He did look at it, and he and Joanna have both looked at this multiple times. I mean, I can double check with him,
Just
but
Do you know
make
what the
a little
temperature of
note.
the temperature of the tire is when it comes out of the truck?
No.
I think you also might have that might be a self-regulating item anyways because you can't get the asphalt from the plant.
yeah,
If
there's
you get, you know,
very
so-
few
Well,
plants
they
that stay
said
open that.
October, I think in the city paves up until November 15th. But then they extend it depending
If
on
it's
weather
not,
too.
yeah, if it's not feasible to do it, they won't make it.
49? Nothing. 50? $51? This is all like boilerplate.
Right.
52? On 52, I had 5418. Corbels of manholes shall be eccentric, not concentric. Can you explain that, Adam, and what corbels are?
No, I couldn't.
A corbel usually holds something up, like if you put a granite countertop on, you might have a corbel that holds up, that provides some stability to the granite. So would that be something that would be down in the
Yes,
manhole?
so it's
It's what
that's
holds
the
that.
ring. It's the ring.
I never
yeah.
saw the word
okay.
before.
I had neither.
Ooh, smart girl.
Maybe eccentric, maybe
Yep.
multicolored, something like that.
Okay, 52 is good. 53.
There's the sidewalks, bituminous concrete, okay.
This is all new too,
Yep.
Adam, right?
Yes.
Yeah, with having some type of base on the sidewalks, because a lot of times in the past, whatever fill happened to be there was just what went down, and go over it with the vibrator and put the asphalt, and
I don't think
next
I
year the
don't,
frost is.
Ronnie, I don't think any of us are qualified to get
To-
into this
Yep.
mixing cement and tar and whatever.
No,
You
it's
know,
good
you're
that
gonna
it's-
have to depend on
Yep, it's good that it's
the
all
highway
there.
department and the engineers to decide
Right,
what's
to-
going on.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
50.
provide the
You're not qualified to
information.
do that.
53 is good. 54 is a beautiful page.
Beautiful page.
Oh, look
It
at
was
that.
blank, yeah.
54 is beautiful.
Actually, questions on that page?
Well, we knew you would. 55?
That just gives us some leeway.
56. I have 5142, the next to the last one down, or the last one. No lot shall be forgotten here, enforcement. No lot shall be considered complete until all stumps, brush, roots, and like material and preservation by the subdivider shall have been removed, disposed of in a manner and place satisfactory to the planning board. I just wrote enforcement. That's the code. That would be the engineer, Adam, or one of your
That would
people.
be me,
You? Wow.
as the town planner.
You know that's gonna be coming. 57? You know, looking at the other pages to see. I got 5161, the developer shall provide competent full-time supervision during the development of the subdivision. If at any time it becomes apparent to the planning board that the supervision is not satisfactory, the board may order work to cease until competent supervision is provided.
I can think of one
I got-
subdivision
yeah,
where
I
that
wrote
would have
down
been
who.
helpful.
Yeah, it would have been
Pappas.
very helpful.
Oh,
Pappas isn't a subdivision.
No, but I'm talking about what was going on up to Pappas Park was poor supervision, and that wasn't good at all.
But we didn't have
That's one
jurisdiction over
thing
that.
All right, that's one thing that should have been taken care of then. We should have got involved in that.
We had no jurisdiction for involvement.
what I wrote here, Adam, was on 5161 was who?
Well, they would have to
That's-
provide competent supervision, but they would have
If
to.
we determine that it's not, the board may order work to cease until competent supervision
Correct,
is
so-
provided. But who's gonna, then at some point, I would imagine we would get involved and decide.
Correct.
They just don't keep providing
No.
somebody new.
They would have to provide somebody as the new supervisor and provide qualifications that the
Let me see
board
that.
felt were.
What is that
Appropriate.
supposed to mean, I guess?
Now, would this go just for a subdivision?
Yes.
Well, then you should include it for more than just a subdivision. For instance, if there's any major parks going on or whatever.
These
you
are
should-
Should almost
subdivision
be for
rules
everything.
and regulations.
Okay,
But just make a note that we would want something like that included in some of the other regs. too.
Well, the problem is that with something like site plan, once this board makes an approval, issues a decision, you no longer have any authority over the project. It becomes a code enforcement issue because
Well, that's you.
No, I'm not code enforcement. That's the building
Building
inspector.
inspector.
Yeah, but he
well,
works.
wait a minute, I don't
Because-
understand that. I don't understand that.
Because site plan is in the zoning bylaw. The code enforcement officer is the enforcer of zoning bylaws. The bylaw gives you the authority to approve the plan and condition that plan per what's in site plan approval. Once you've done that, you've executed your duty under the bylaw, and it's up to the code enforcement officer to enforce the decision. If you feel that there is something that you issued in your decision that is not being followed, you are welcome to bring it to the attention of the code enforcement officer, but this board doesn't have any enforcement authority over site plan approval.
Then maybe somebody,
So in
you're
other
gonna
words,
look
you're
at
saying-
it from another way.
So in other words, you're saying that in the provisions for competent supervision in a subdivision, we can do something about that?
Correct.
Okay, but in the construction of a park or any other big projects in town that we have to have site plan approval for, we don't have any authority at all.
You're correct.
I'd like to see the law on that one.
There is no law on site plan approval. And because it is a zoning bylaw, the code enforcement officer is the legal enforcing authority. Mass General Law speaks specifically to subdivisions and gives the power for enforcement to the planning board and its agent.
So what exactly do you mean here by competent full-time supervision? This is for the construction project,
Correct. So
Right?
essentially,
Not for if there were off-hour vandalism. or things
no,
like
no,
that.
no,
This
no,
is
no.
just
This is if
construction
you go up
supervision.
there and there's a bunch of
Yeah.
guys and machines digging random holes
Yeah,
and just throwing dirt everywhere, and you go, who's in charge? And they all go like this.
got it. Okay.
You can be like, all right, you're done. Shut everything down. Everybody go home. Tell your boss to call me, and then you go back and call the guy and say,
So you have to hire a reputable.
essentially, yeah,
Contractor.
you have to have somebody monitoring the site.
And who from the planning board would be doing the duty of going up there and telling the people to do that?
Me.
Ah.
If there were complaints about incompetent supervision,
Well,
Is that what your question is? Yeah. I would go up there and I would issue the cease and desist,
the
and
way
then
this,
bring it to the board and say, this is what happened, and
the way this reads though, the board would deem that that's not an in-May order. So
correct. Well, I mean, what would happen is I would bring it to the board, and the board would say, all right, here's what happened. I would probably go up there, investigate what the complaint was, find out who's in
I
charge.
guess I was going to say, hey, we trust you. If you wanted to
If
put
that's-
that in,
Well, that's
that
why I
the
wrote who,
board's
like
office
who's gonna,
agent,
who does it?
the board's agent
Mm-hmm.
deems it will be considered, they'll be ordered cease until the planning board can review. And,
Well, what I'll do is I'll call it the board or its agent.
Okay.
John, you must have a lot on 58.
Get me started on 58. This blank page. Should it say this page was intentionally left blank?
It could.
Yeah.
All right, 59.
There's your 2-year time completion.
Yeah, because I made a reference to Bryn Mawr Estates.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Anything on 59? 60. $61. 62. Ah, 62. Under 68, 681 inspection requirements, Adam, there's DPW director and other planning board. I just put sometimes inspection by town, some by developer. And I think it was in respect to I got it between 6.7 and 6.8.
Okay, hold on.
think
Let,
it
let me
might-
let me read it real quick.
6.8.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to for the developer is the as-built stuff, which isn't technically inspection. It's a
Right,
Yeah.
I wasn't
And
sure
there
exactly
is-
what it.
There is a provision for the applicant's engineer to submit construction reports on work done outside of the allowed paving times if they're approved, and to be inspected by the town after a certain date, but that's probably a fairly unusual occurrence.
63. $64. Now we got a lot of diagrams and charts. I want to go through each one.
Listen,
Make the
I'd like to
filibuster
jump.
for
I'd like to jump back to one thing before we retire. Under section 3.1.5, compliance with zoning. In here, I see one paragraph where there should be about 10. One thing that we have run into in the past that has no definitive answer to, and nobody was willing to even get into it, is the fact that a person that owns a lot and it's an industrial lot, and he wants the lot converted to business, and he says, okay, let's see, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna spot zone it. Well, according to everything that I've read, in order to do that, it requires 2/3 of town meeting to change zoning. And yet, and it has to be, and if the ZBA is going to do it, it has to be under hardship for either the buyer or the seller to get an approval from the zoning board to spot zone this piece of property. There's nothing in here about
Well, you don't
change of
want to
use.
spot
There's-
zone it.
there's-
That's what it's called when they do that.
That's what it was, but there's nothing in here about spot zoning. There's nothing in here about change of use of zoning. There should be something in here about that.
It means the
Well,
preclusion of it.
That isn't a subdivision issue. That's a Mass General Law issue. So that's spoken to in Mass General Law. The provision for rezoning property is outlined in 40A.
I know, but there should be something in our bylaws here, okay? That somebody can't just come in, okay, and go scampering off to the ZBA and get spot zoning done when there's absolutely no reason for it.
But what you're asking for is not something that is under the purview of this document or this board. If that is something you'd like to pursue, the board should look at putting a zoning bylaw in place that prohibits the issuance of use variances. Currently, the zoning bylaws allow use variances. So, under that, the zoning board has that authority. If there were a zoning bylaw that prohibited use variances, they would not be able to do that.
The zoning, the
Which is
zoning board
referred
has,
to as
the
spot.
zoning board of appeals, okay, has, you know, an inherent right to follow the law.
Correct.
And they're not doing it. Point, Sovereign Bank, right on Route 20. They had that property spot zoned. Now, the buyer is Sovereign Bank. There's no hardship there. The seller of the property is William Reisner. Do you think there's any hardship there? Why was the ZBA, that's why I'm getting it. Why was the ZBA, rather than say to the, and I have no problem with Sovereign Bank being there, but if everybody else in town has to do the right thing, so shouldn't they? Why didn't the ZBA or the planning board or whoever say to them, look, no problem, go to the town meeting and get your 2/3 vote for change of use, and we're all set with that. But that's not what happened. That's why I said I think we need something in.
This is
There
This
could have
is
been an
not the
appeal.
place for it, though.
yeah, this is not the appropriate document to include something like that in.
So what we have, Adam, is this is planning board rules and regulations. Then we have the zoning bylaw for the town
Correct.
of Auburn.
And this
That's
isn't even.
another,
This is
much more than this.
And if the actual title of the document is Planning Board Rules and Regulations for the Subdivision of Land. So this document only covers
Doesn't even cover all our
subdivisions.
rules and regulations
Correct.
for all of those things.
Just some of them.
It just covers the subdivision of land.
You can have that back, by the way.
Are we all set?
We're all set.
Motion to adjourn?
Hey,
You didn't look at
look at the.
you didn't look at
all
the
flowers.
cross sections.
I did look at
You-
those.
you
Oh, we're not gonna, you don't wanna do all the cross
I don't want to
sections
do any
and
of the
forms?
cross.
You don't want to do the forms?
No.
There's lots of forms to look at.
And I,
See you later.
Quite honestly, the forms are benign. They're a vehicle of information.
Make a motion to adjourn.
second?
Second. All in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.